Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us both here in the auditorium with us as well as virtually. I would like to call this meeting to order of Wednesday, September the 1st, which is a call board meeting with the purpose of discussing the school operations in light of the current COVID-related activity. I need a motion to approve the agenda, if I could, please. Motion made by Mr. Farnsworth, seconded by Ms. Wimberly. Any discussion? All in favor? 6. And we also have Mr. Guthrie online.
Aye.
7 and 0. Okay, we're going to begin our workshop, so I will need a motion to go into a workshop setting, please.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Ms. Robinson, seconded by Ms. Crosby. Any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Guthrie?
Aye.
7 and 0. Okay, we're in workshop setting. I am going to turn it over now to Ms. Conarans.
No? Okay. Maybe if everybody's okay. Ms. Rainer, are you okay if I don't have a mask on? All right, good. Good evening, Mrs. Hughes, members of the board, and Mr. Guthrie online, and anyone else who is online. Our purpose here tonight, as you said, is to provide you in this workshop setting with an update on our school operations based on where we are with the COVID issues and responses in our schools. And so although I am going to be the primary person to deliver the information, please know that I do have the entire team here with me today, so that as we are in a workshop setting, if there are questions, then any one of the team can help and answer those questions and provide you the information that you need in order to make any decisions that are necessary. So as we, and I told Lee that I was going to try to do all of this at one time. It may not work. Multitasking is not my little deal. So which one is it, Lee?
Ms. Conarans,
yes,
can I just make a comment? Mr. Pye is also joining us online. So just so everyone knows, he had a meeting in Columbia,
Thank
which
you.
was to basically discuss with all of the other state of South Carolina districts COVID and how they're handling it, different related issues that they have going on. So we thought it was very important that Mr. Pye be there to hear maybe there's some things that they're doing that we're not aware of, and vice versa. So he is there doing that. He is online so that he can and he will be joining in
Yes.
throughout this discussion. So
Absolutely.
just wanted to let everybody know that.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Ms. Hughes. As we begin, I want to kind of let you know where we are data-wise right now. And this is current as we can get as of today. As you all are aware, our numbers change, not hourly, not daily, but sometimes minutely. I know that's not a word, but that is as quickly as it can change. So as of our dashboard posting this morning, you can see, and on this slide, I'm going to focus on our students for just a moment, but you can see that we currently have 526 students who are isolated due to a positive COVID test. We have an additional 4,559 students who are quarantined after being identified as a close contact with a person who has tested positive. So that gives us district-wide a total of 5,085 students who are absent due to COVID or COVID-related reasons. And as you know, this dashboard just reflects the COVID issues and the COVID-related reasons. And based on our current total student enrollment, that represents about 20.5% of our total student population. Other district statistics that are very important because they impact the operation, the daily operation of our schools. On this slide, I'd like to focus on our staff. Currently, we have 75 staff who are isolated due to a positive COVID test. We also have an additional 38 staff who are quarantined after being identified as a close contact. So that is 113 staff absences noted on the dashboard due to either being positive themselves or quarantined as a close contact. It's important to know at this point in time that we have, as of today, or today, we had 37 additional staff that were absent due to COVID family-related issues. And by that, an example would be if I am a teacher and my child either tested positive or was placed in quarantine as a close contact, I had to stay home as the caregiver for that. So that was an additional 37 staff members. On top of that, there were an additional today 114 additional staff absences due to other reasons, FMLA, other illness, I just had other non-COVID related issues that caused them to be out. So that brought our total of absences just today across our schools at 264 staff members. Additionally, we've had 9 certified staff resignations since school started. 5 of those are recently, and they indicated to us that it was because of fears and concerns related to COVID and the strand of the virus right now. Oops. Oh, okay. So I want to break it down just a little bit further for you because not only do our instructional and support staff impact our schools, but so many of our operational staff also impact the day-to-day operation of our schools in a safe manner. All of our departments are important. Some play a little more critical role because they're actually on the front line of those instructional processes. And so I want to start with nursing services because we all know and you all have acknowledged over and over again the importance of having nurses in our schools. And this was pre-COVID. It's always important to have our schools fully staffed with nurses because they have so many roles and responsibilities. The first 45 days of school are always a crunch time for them, getting immunization records and health charts up to date and all of that. And now, you know, with COVID on top of it, it makes it even more challenging or the responsibilities even greater. So right now, in our nursing department, we have 5 nursing vacancies. We have recently had 2 of those 5 basic vacancies resign, again, citing concerns related to COVID. And we have 8 UAP vacancies. In addition to those vacancies, the nursing services department is averaging 10 nurses or UAPs out daily due to either COVID-related or other health-related absences. So that's quite a hit to our schools on a daily basis. And just like you're going to hear, and there are going to be some points in time when I sound like a broken record, but we're finding it hard to find substitutes to come in because all of our employers are facing staffing shortages, our healthcare providers are facing staffing shortages, and so it's hard to get substitutes in any and all areas. So the impact of a lessened nursing department in our schools naturally is lack of the nursing coverage. So not only are COVID-related issues being hampered, but also non-COVID related issues. Nurses either not being at the school or having to split schools also impacts our ability to effectively conduct contact tracing in a timely manner at the school level. By that, collecting seating charts, getting the information to the district contract tracing team, helping with parent notifications, etc. The subs that we do have on are what we call our full-time nursing substitutes that we have on staff all the time. They have now been deployed to various schools from the district level to various schools in order to put an actual nurse in schools during the day, because that's where we need the body. And so that takes them away from the daytime assistance with other duties that are related to COVID, and we're having to push those into the afternoon and evening hours, again, lengthening their day as well. So again, it's challenging to manage the health clinics, including all of their non-COVID related responsibilities. And that really has come into play more and more because we are seeing an increase early in the morning of students getting off the buses, going to first period or to their homeroom period of class, and then being sent to the health clinic or to the isolation room because they're coming to school presenting symptoms of illness, particularly symptoms of potential COVID positive. And so, you know, we're having students arrive at school with these symptoms, and so having a lack of nursing personnel on staff is making that very difficult to manage, but other people are having to go in, which as we know, poses a domino effect. And then challenging without our UAPs, who are primarily helping with our isolation rooms. When they are lacking or not present, then we're having trouble providing coverage in our isolation rooms and are having to pull from other available staff. Transportation is another critical arm of our instructional program, because without being able to get our children to school in a timely and efficient manner, we certainly can't provide instruction. Currently in the transportation department, we have 16 vacancies. Every substitute driver that Mr. Shope has available is currently running a route, and so again, we don't have an overage of substitutes in that department. We are averaging 20 to 25 drivers in addition to the vacancies out daily due to COVID-related or other illness or family emergency situations. The impact there is that they are having to run double runs, meaning that driver A shows up at Newington Elementary School and drops off a load of students, and then immediately goes back out and picks up another load of Newington students and comes back to that school. So they're running two routes to that one school versus their one route and then being able to go to their next school. We're also having to combine runs where available, where able, and that runs into problems because it adds children to buses that can be typically overcrowded. When we get to a crowded capacity, that's when we revert to the double runs. And so again, we are seeing a domino effect there. Also, too, having to do either double runs or combination runs presents an inability to have consistent seating charts because students are riding different buses on different days, or they're combined with another bus and they're not in the same seats, which impedes effective contact tracing and notification of parents. What a big concern, and you'll see this come up again later on, is that buses, particularly at the middle and high school levels, arriving late to school on a daily basis because we get backed up in the elementary ranks. We're having students who are missing significant amounts of instruction in their first period classes. And so that's a problem anytime that happens, but it is a particular problem when we're in our credit-bearing classes and we're needing to account for seat time to award credits.
Ms. Canarins, can I ask, we see there's 16 vacancies. Was that since the beginning of school?
Yes, ma'am.
So we had that many right at the very start of school.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
the 20 to 25 drivers are out daily due to COVID-related and other absences, do we have a number for the actual COVID?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, I have it charted. Mr. Shope has provided a chart of
Okay.
the numbers that are related to COVID. We just combined them to give an overall pictures, but I can give you that number.
Just so we know, it's
Sure.
very helpful, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Be glad to. Also, too, and this again, the next point is again primarily at the middle and high school level. At the end of the day, when our buses get backlogged and arriving at the schools to pick up for dismissal, when the buses aren't there at dismissal and we're having to wait for them to come, it causes a problem with the supervision of large number of students waiting on the buses. For example, when we were meeting on Monday with our principals, or yesterday, I'm sorry, we met yesterday with our principals, and Mr. Farrell at Somerville High School gave an example that at the end of the day on Monday, they have 39 routes, or 39 buses that are assigned to Somerville High School. At 3:55, when the bell rang, they had 5 buses on campus because the other ones were delayed because of the elementary routes being delayed and then the middle school routes. And so in a school that large, even though some students drive, it still poses and leaves many students on campus waiting for those buses to arrive. And trust me, those buses are getting there just as quickly as they possibly can. But, you know, fighting the double routes and the combination routes and the Somerville traffic, add that on there, and it does make it very challenging with that. And then on the back end of that, when they're arriving so late, we're having some students not get home until 5:30 or 6 at night, which makes for an extremely long day for our students, not to mention our staff. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Kinnearns, I was just wondering, remember last year, we said we were going to encourage parents to pick up more?
We are. Yes, we continue to encourage parents. We're getting ready to ramp that up more. And a lot of it is that because we don't have 9,000 people in our virtual academy this year, we're having more and more people students back in our schools, which we want them there. We absolutely want them there, and they're utilizing transportation. But we are, yes, ma'am, encouraging parents at all levels, whenever possible. It really will help with our transportation if we can transport the students. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Our food service department is right now showing 34 vacancies. They're averaging 15 to 20 out due to COVID-related issues. And they are working, even though they are an independent contractor, they are working with third-party contractors all the time, trying temp agencies, any ways that they can, and trying to mitigate their vacancies. Impacts there for our schools is that we're having to modify our service models, and we're doing that for COVID as well. It limits the menu variety and the student selection for students, which ultimately impacts participation. At the high school level, it impacts our kiosks. Because they're not able to offer as many different kiosks during ILT, which again causes more large group combinations at the kiosks, and so that doesn't help with social distancing. And they, in their department, and you'll see in the maintenance department as well, based on production and supply and demand, are beginning to experience delivery delays. I know that Mr. Zaney and his team are doing a great job getting our supplies so that we are not running short. We're not running behind. As a matter of fact, he goes to some of the distributors every morning and picks up the supplies to not wait on delivery so that we can keep our schools up and running in the food service department. Yes, ma'am.
I had a question about, so the food is still free,
Yes, ma'am.
but students are having to, I guess, scan their ID or tell their name to get the food this year?
Not
Is that-
anymore.
Okay.
Because after the first week of school, I guess across the state, that was causing quite the backup and quite the delay, that they have been granted permission, all the food services across the state have been granted permission to go back to the tally mark. And so that has extremely reduced the time going through the line and the scanning and the writing of things. So that got fixed very quickly. Thank you, because that did cause a backup. Our custodial, and we have seen an uptick in participation. I don't know if it's because it's free or because we are now utilizing our cafeterias in a different manner, and whether the students are eating in classrooms or they're being spaced out in other areas, they are able to go through the cafeteria line to pick up their hot menu. So that gives them choice. And so it's not just everybody gets the grab and go same meal. So that could be a reason for the uptick too, but we're happy to see that.
So you mean an uptick since last year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Custodial right now has 16 vacancies, averaging 15 staff out daily due to absences. The impact is, it kind of stretches the remaining custodial staff in the buildings to make sure that we're cleaning and sanitizing classroom and buildings, that we're staying on top of those high-touch areas, and just general building cleanliness. Again, all of our departments are making this work. It's just getting to a point where we're stretching everybody quite thinly, but we are working as a team to get it done. Maintenance, 7 vacancies, an average of 5 additional staff out a day. How this impacts our schools is it creates a longer response time to fulfill work orders. And so when teachers or schools are requesting things to be done in their classrooms or whatever, it may be taking a little longer to get that done. Staff are being pulled, just like in our schools, in our maintenance department, staff are being pulled from their assigned schools to cover other areas or work orders in multiple areas and locations, and sometimes outside of their realm of expertise. But everybody is rallying together to do what needs to get done in order to, because our schools are our top priority, and within our schools, our classrooms are our top priorities to get done what needs to get done for our teachers and for our students and for instruction to continue. And again, like with food service, maintenance is experiencing a shortage of materials based on production and delivery delays based on supply and demand. So we have things on back order, but they're dribbling in. It's just that not everything is here when we want it. Unfortunately, we can't get everything from Amazon the next day. All right, so with all of these staffing shortages, as I said, we've managed to keep Band-Aids on our wounds at this point in time, and everybody has been working day and night to get it done, but it is having an impact on instruction. Because, as I said earlier, in the classroom and in all of our departments, we're experiencing a lack of substitutes at all levels. Our schools have been working with their PTAs, their SICs, their other departments. They're working with Ms. Rayner and her contacts to try to build an in-house or an in-school pool of substitutes. For example, let's just, I'm going to use Ms. Wimberly as an example. For example, Ms. Wimberly has children at Somerville High School, and she may feel comfortable being a substitute only at Somerville High School because that's the school of her comfort zone. And so they're working to try to build those in-house, and then they have that list and can call on those. Ms. Finari and her department naturally are working on trying to build the substitutes, but we're having a hard time getting substitutes into our schools. So with that being said, how are we keeping our classes covered with our staff outages? Well, all school-based staff and that means administrators, the counselors, any unencumbered teachers, like teachers on their planning periods, if they volunteer, the instructional coaches, facilitators, nurses are covering isolation rooms and other places. Anybody who has a free moment is pitching in and covering where they need to in those clinics, in those isolation rooms, and in their classrooms, because our goal has been to try to keep the instructional process going as best we can. District staff has also been deployed to schools in order to do the same thing. We're using our interventionists, we're using our assistant directors, we've had our directors go out to help in any way they can, whether that's covering a class, whether that's teaching a class, whether that's opening doors at the car rider line, or assisting with other duties in order to try to provide a relief for a teacher or a staff member, or just to plug the hole in order to keep it going. So we've been utilizing that as well. We've been using large spaces in instances where we've had to do any kind of class combinations, which we're trying not to do, so that we can keep our cohorts separate. But if we have classes that are expanding their classroom footprint, we are using large spaces, media centers, outdoor classroom spaces, anything that we can in order to try to distance our children and keep instruction going on. Teachers have been great in providing instruction and virtual at the same time when necessary. Our teachers are very committed to their students. I think we all know that. They want to do whatever they can to keep those students who are in an isolation setting or quarantine setting as caught up as they possibly can. So they've really and truly stepped up to the plate and are helping in that regard. They're also providing after-school instruction for our quarantine students who might not be able to join in during the actual class period, or who have additional questions or need assistance after school hours. They're there and available for them as well. And one of the impacts on instruction with so many students out in isolation and quarantine and returning at various times throughout, it creates a disruption in learning, because everybody is now entering and leaving at different times. It's like that revolving door, and everybody is no longer on the same page as far as the instructional process goes. And so having that fragmentation is really causing a fragmentation in the learning process. Yes, ma'am.
Are the teachers being compensated for teaching in person and virtually, and also for the after-school instruction?
Yes, ma'am. They are being compensated in accordance with the proviso that was passed. They absolutely are.
Is there a certain way that's being done? Do they turn in their time, or is it the same for all? I mean, how does...
We are, that's kind of hard to explain, because they're different modes of, but when let's just say that a teacher in a classroom with quarantine students, if she has, 5 students in the classroom and 10 students on quarantine, and she's teaching them together, we do have to keep a timesheet for that. We have to keep the students' names for that, and we have to turn that into the State Department, and Tina can nod, yes. And we have to turn that into the State Department on a monthly basis for tracking and for coding purposes. So, and I will be honest with you, we're still working out the tracking part, but we are doing it. We are doing the instruction. The teachers will be compensated for that.
Ms. Canaris, do you have any ballpark figure off the top of your head what percentage of teachers are doing this?
I would say our majority of teachers, I'm going to look at Ms. Estep and Ms. Radcliffe.
They had the choice at the elementary level of either doing dual modality, where they're teaching at the same time in person and virtually, Or if they didn't want to do dual modality, a lot of them did not with the younger children, then they are doing an hour after school 2 or 3 times per week. But I got all of those plans from the principals this past Monday afternoon, before 11, on what they were doing at their school.
At the secondary level, they are doing it in dual modality. When the students are both quarantined and in person, that teacher is sharing her screen and turning on her camera so that she's able to instruct both ways.
Okay. But we don't know a percentage or how many yet.
If I were a betting woman, I'd almost say 100%, because right now it appears that there's at least 1 to 2 students that have been quarantined in all of their classes.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thank you.
That's a rough guesstimate.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't mean to contradict you at all, but a teacher just texted me and said, we have not been compensated or communicated about this at all.
We were currently trying to finalize the amount of the compensation and how we were going to document. We have shared that information with our principals, and they're going to be pushing it out to their faculty as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Ms. Wimberly.
So is it, since that's coming from the state, are the teachers across the entire state compensated in the same way, or is that, so we make a decision about how much we compensate our teachers for this? Or?
That is totally up to district by district.
Okay.
And so that makes it even more difficult because we want to be in step with our neighboring districts as close as we can. But we even reached out to the State Department and asked that very question, and they said that it's all over the map, all across the districts, that there's no real median amount, that it's just district by district. Sometimes I wish there were things that were statewide.
And that's using ESSER funding
Yes, ma'am.
to pay that?
Absolutely, and that is an allowable funding through ESSER because that addresses the category of learning loss and preventing learning loss. And it was in our plan, yes.
Right.
We did budget that into our plan.
Okay, and so you said you're rolling it out, the plan out, Mr. Radcliffe was saying, I think, to the teachers
Right.
shortly.
They have been,
Well, they're doing it, I know, but I'm
Correct.
just talking about the compensation piece.
Correct.
Because I know that they are just
Right.
working themselves to
yes, yes.
the bone. So,
yes.
I mean,
and it
obviously
will
that's
all
important to all
be
of us.
absolutely retroactive to day one. So that is not a problem at all.
Is that something that will be tacked on to like each paycheck, or is it something, a lump sum that will come in the end? Or
It'll
do
come
we-
at the end. Tina, I'm going to, which semester? And so then because for reporting purposes, it's easier to do it as a December stipend and then as the end of the year stipend.
Okay, sorry. So is it based on how long they do it? Is that part of it? I mean, if it continues for, I mean, you know, we don't know how long it'll be needed, I guess. So just based on.
It is based on if they teach a student, 5 students, they qualify for the stipend during the semester.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So if they do it at all, it'll be a stipend.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. We have determined that it should be a stipend. And if you didn't do any of it, then you don't qualify for a stipend. If I'm a betting woman, that's never going to happen based on the current situation that we're in. But so if you have worked with 5 students, if you work with 10 students, you qualify for the stipend each semester.
Okay, great.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Yes, ma'am.
That won't come from the ESSA money?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And we had already built that into our ESSER plan.
Thank you.
I have a question. We're talking about teachers in this situation. What about everybody else who's pulling double duties, doing things and chipping in to make this happen? The bus drivers and that kind of thing? Are
We
they
haven't,
being compensated
I'm going to
as
be
well?
honest with you, we've been so focused on the instructional part and keeping our instructional part going. We haven't addressed that, and we will. because everyone is. However, I will say, as far as like bus drivers taking on additional routes, just like teachers get compensation for giving up their planning period to pick up a class, bus drivers get compensation for taking on that additional route. We started that, actually we started that probably 2 years ago, pre-COVID, when we were having a driver shortage in order to incentivize picking up another route instead of having your off time, your wait time.
Okay.
So,
I just
Ms.
wanna-
Did that help, Ms. Heath? Did that help?
It did. I just want to make sure that we look.
We're looking,
at the
we
whole-
look
the
at,
big
we
picture
look
of
at
it.
all of our folks. We absolutely do. But to provide an incentive or a stipend, we have to tie it back to COVID-related, which
Exactly.
right now, that's not hard to do.
Right.
Ms. Canaris?
Yes, ma'am.
Like for the custodians that are pulling double duty or working overtime, whatever, you said you're looking into compensating them as well?
Well, if the custodians are working overtime, they already get paid time and a half for doing that, because
Probably
that
bus
is-
drivers as well.
That is federal law. Bus drivers, as I just said, if they are doing an additional route, then they are compensated for that additional route.
That's classified I'm talking about, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
What about our nurses? Because I've heard stories of them working till midnight.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and that's the truth.
I believe it.
That is the truth. And we are working, Mr. Pye and Ms. Meunier and I had a conversation about the nurses in the middle of last week, and we are working on a compensation strategy for them, just as we've done with the teachers. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Okay. We're good? All right. So where we are with quarantined classes, we know that we don't have, and Amanda, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have any class right now that has been untouched without at least one student quarantined or one student positive. If we do, it's very few. But in some instances, we have had to go ahead and quarantine whole classrooms. This is nothing new. We had to quarantine whole classrooms last year based on the percent positive and those that were identified as close contact. However, it's more this year. Currently, we are now in our third week of school, and we currently have 33 elementary classes across our 15 schools who the entire class is under quarantine status, either due to the children being positive and or close contacts, or having the lack of a teacher and inability to find someone to put in that classroom to keep instruction going on. The majority of it is because of the students who are either tested positive or who are in close contact. In that same line, as you all know, we have extended day programs in our elementary schools after school, and we have had to quarantine 3 cohorts of extended day at various schools. It's not as easy to quarantine an entire class at the secondary level, middle and high school, because they don't travel in cohorts. But we are monitoring to see if any particular class and what their numbers are, and watching that and monitoring. But we don't have a number that says, 4 middle school classes were quarantined because they don't travel in cohorts. Yes, Ms. Crosby?
Got another text here. I guess everybody's really listening tonight or watching. And again, I don't want to contradict you, but this person, I just lost it. It just seems that I think it's probably a mix-up in communication or whatever, but I sent the text back and said they're getting time and a half, like you just said.
I believe that's what it is, isn't
And
it?
they said, this is not correct, we are salary
Like
and not getting.
custodial, Tina? For over 40 hours.
Yeah.
And that is a federal law.
Yeah, and she says, no, this is not correct, we are salary and not getting supplemental pay, I'm classified and I'm not getting any compensation.
if you can,
It's just a telephone number, there's no name to it. But I'm just saying, you know, remember,
It sounds like maybe some specific issues that we could look at
Right,
outside
correct.
of this.
Thank you.
So, are you good, Ms. Crosby?
I didn't hear what you said, I'm
I
sorry.
was saying, that sounds like some specific issues that maybe the district can work on with teachers.
Well, I was just trying to make it clear, right, so she could clarify it right here, because, you know, so they would know, but I wasn't trying to,
Yeah, no, just ask them to get with, follow that chain, go to their principal
Go to
and
the
talk to their
principal,
principal.
exactly.
And then they will
Right.
come up and they will make sure that that happens,
Right.
because that is the case. They should be getting
Okay.
paid. so.
Correct, correct. And they can also, for example, you know, if it's a custodial worker, they should go to Ms. Batten, who is the director of that department, and we can start getting everything addressed, utilizing that chain. Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Yes, Mr. Barnsberg?
And I apologize, if this is later on in your presentation, you certainly don't have to answer now. And the honest answer is it's probably more for Nurse Santa Maria. Can you give us a primer? Can we just go back to square one on just kind of a refresher on quarantine process, the exclusion list, who's quarantined? Do we quarantine more for social distancing and masking, vaccinated? Can you kind of go through those high-level pieces for us? And while you're walking up, thank you, by the way. I don't know if everybody here knows, everybody watching, Nurse Santa Maria, you're here probably till midnight every single night for the past few months. So it's just unbelievable. So I just want to say thank you before you start.
Sure. So kind of the basics of quarantine. Quarantine is for individuals who are exposed to someone who is positive for COVID-19. It is a DHEC requirement. It's not optional for us to contact trace or quarantine. The current definition of close contact is individuals who are closer than 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. When both individuals are students and they are both masked, that distance can be reduced down to 3 feet. So unfortunately, we have not encountered many situations where we've been able to use that criteria because we don't have masks on all of our students. When it's a staff member or an adult involved close contact, it's always 6 feet, whether it's staff to staff or staff to student. The contact tracing process is conducted through a variety of means depending on the cohort. If it's a classroom, we review seating charts. Occasionally, the nurses or administrators will go down to the classroom and actually measure from seat to seat if there's a question. Seating charts aren't always to scale, so we want to be sure. It's definitely an involved process. It takes a little bit of time from confirming the case to gathering that data and then notifying parents. It's not always an immediate process, especially with the volume that we're seeing, but that's kind of what it looks like.
And then on the other side, so what are the time lengths of quarantine versus isolation? And then I think is there a difference also between if they identify as being vaccinated versus not?
Yes. So individuals who test positive for COVID isolate for 10 days from the onset of their symptoms. If they're asymptomatic, it's 10 days from their test date. Individuals who are exposed quarantine for 14 days from their last exposure. That's our current quarantine requirement. When you live in the same household as someone who's positive, it's 14 days from the last day that you're exposed to that person. So if the positive person is able to fully isolate themselves in the home, it's 14 days. If they're not able to, it's 14 days from the last day of their 10-day isolation. So typically about 24 days. As far as criteria to release from quarantine, the current guidance from DHEC and the CDC is if you're fully vaccinated, meaning at least 14 days has passed since your second dose of your vaccine, you don't need to quarantine. You need to wear a mask, monitor for symptoms, and social distance to the fullest extent possible. Also, if you've had COVID within the last 90 days, then you're not required to complete a quarantine process, again, as long as you're asymptomatic.
Got it, thank you. And I apologize again for being redundant, but I want to reiterate to folks, that as far as the actual quarantine and isolation, i.e. sending students home, that's not anything, that's not a district policy, that's an exclusion list from the state of South Carolina, correct?
Correct. We have a school and child care exclusion list that's existed long before COVID, and it dictates who can be in school and who can't, depending on what illness they're suffering from. COVID-19 is an excludable illness, depending on their symptoms, as is COVID-19 exposure. So it's not optional for us to contact trace and quarantine close contacts.
Got it, thank you.
While you're there, can I ask, I have been hearing where some districts are moving it down to 10 days rather than 14 days. So it is an option that we can do that, is that correct?
It's something that we're looking into, and we do have some information on that
Okay,
later
that's
in the
later on,
presentation.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Barnsworth, I was trying to put your two names together, it's like just far as, sorry. Another thing too is we need to remember is that CDC, those are guidelines. Those are just guidelines.
But I want to be very clear. You're right. On the tail end, if you heard what she said, at the tail end, there are guidelines that are present based on the vaccination status. But as far as the actual quarantine, that was my question. As far as the actual quarantine and isolation, that's not a CDC or DHEC guideline. That is an exclusion list by statute from the state of South Carolina. So that's not the guideline. That's what I want to make sure folks understand.
And like you said about the 10 days, some had said 7. I even spoke to my doctor about that, and he said if they go 5 days, if they're good for 5 days and then go get tested and they're negative, which takes 2 days usually get a return, he said that's 7 days, and that's sufficient time. Because you figure, just like you said, it could be 28 days. That's a whole month that a child is out of school. And that is just
24, but there are definitely different options, 7 days or 10 days, which we'll discuss later on in the presentation.
right. But this 28 days is just not cool.
Okay, this may seem like a crazy question, but just for information for all of us, can you kind of explain, there's obviously many reasons why we have so many more students on quarantine this year than last year. Can you just address that a little bit? I know some of the reasons are obvious, but just, I feel like there are multiple factors in that. And so could you talk about that just to clarify?
Sure. So first and foremost, we're seeing a much larger number of cases. So with every case, we contact trace, we identify close contacts, depending on the setting, depending on the cohort. Could be 2 close contacts, it could be 20. So that's the first thing. The second thing is obviously the social distancing piece. We had a lot of students in our virtual academy last year and a lot of students not in our district. They have, for the most part, returned to our buildings with the exception of, 650 roughly. So all of those students have now returned to our buses and our schools and are in our classrooms, and so they're very full. So social distancing, what used to be very sort of possible previously, is really non-existent at this point. We do the best that we can. Our teachers do great about trying to keep students apart, but unfortunately it's not always possible. And then obviously without masks, it increases the number because, again, if both individuals are masked and 3 feet apart, they don't need to quarantine. But most individuals are not masked, and so we have to quarantine them because of that requirement.
Thank you.
One more quick question, and again, this may be something you guys cover later in the presentation, I don't know. Have we looked at, because I know you and your team are very, very, very backed up right now, I think just based on what's happening. Have we looked at any sort of third-party solutions as far as the contact tracing, additional resources to help us with what you're doing right now?
Sure. So we've been in touch with DHEC. They have some options out there for assistance with contact tracing. We're just kind of waiting to get more information about what those options look like. And as far as your comment, we were very backed up, but we've been doing a pretty good job of getting caught up. We're about 1 day out from notifications at this point. So for example, if a student was in school positive Monday, they should have received a notification by now. So that's pretty good. That's in line with what we were doing last year. So despite the volume, we're getting there.
If we did, and we started looking at, say, some third-party resources or something to come in and help us, and this is maybe for Tina, how would we write that into the ESSER funds? I'm assuming they could be used for that?
I would think that it would fall under the continuity of services, that we would be able to continue our services and pay for it with ESSER money. It's specifically COVID-related.
Yeah, might just be something we can look into to lessen the burden. When we looked at the nursing numbers earlier, and you guys can't even do regular routine medical stuff. I heard a nurse the other day on the phone trying to notify folks, meanwhile trying to give medicine to a child. That's not okay. So maybe if we start looking at some of those solutions, and it sounds like the funding is there, we just need to make it happen.
Can I go back, please, ma'am, to the actual cases? Because we have so many kids out because of contact tracing. Are our actual cases about the same, or are they more or less than last year this time?
Oh, they're significantly more.
They're significantly
Yes.
more in our district, or in the county, or in our district?
It's tough to say. I'm not sure how other districts are reporting their information, how quickly it's getting out there. I know that our dashboard is updated every evening and posted the next morning with those current numbers, so I can only speak to what our reporting looks like, but internally, we definitely are seeing much more
Than we did
last
last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Good? Good. All right, so we kind of gave you the lay of the land, where we are number-wise, and where we are with the impact to instruction. And now we kind of would like to have a discussion, question and answer period about proposed next steps. And what we have talked about internally are proposals as to how we can mitigate continued large numbers, how we can do things like Mr. Farnsworth just mentioned, assist with our contact tracing, which we are, looking into companies. I got another one today that offering services, and so we just have to go through and see what that looks like and how that can be beneficial for that. So we can, as we go through this next part, we've met in many PLCs with with Mr. Pye and the district cabinet, the principals, their administrative teams, in order to get input, because those folks are on the front line. They're talking to their teachers to get information and ideas. And so the proposals that we have for you were born out of some concerns that we've really already talked about, but I'm going to just kind of reiterate them. First off, the secondary students, as we said, missing instructional time in first period primarily due to late buses. And once we get backed up, that's that domino effect, and it just keeps rolling. And so we have an option that we'd like for you all to consider as far as a bell schedule change that may help prevent that and get our students to school on time and home at a more decent hour. We are seeing, as Amanda said, the increased number of quarantined and positive staff, which is beginning to cause a great and larger strain on our instructional staff and on the supervision throughout the schools. And that is in line with the increased number of quarantined and positive students, again, causing a disruption in the learning process, and that coming and going, having everybody on a different page. What can we maybe do to, at this point in time, to get everybody back on a same page and move forward? And then we are concerned about the numbers of support staff and administrators being pulled to cover classes and taking them away from their other primary responsibilities, being able to return parent phone calls or emails in a timely manner, doing PLCs with their own staff to talk about instructional issues, to be in and out of classrooms, doing observations and those types of things. And trust me, nobody is doing it unwillingly, because, as I said, we're all doing what we need to do to keep the instruction going. It's just getting, with the increase in our numbers daily, it's just getting harder and harder at this point in time. So as we look at some proposals, we always know that keeping on like we're keeping on is an option. Is it an ideal option at this point in time? We think probably not, but we need to have a conversation about that and look at that. But the first proposal we would like to throw out is your consideration, a bell schedule change for this school year. And if you look at the proposed, it should look very familiar to you, because it's pretty much the identical schedule that we ran last year, and again, almost for the identical reasons. We're proposing that elementary move to a 7:15 to 2 o'clock day, Our middle school's in 8:30 to 3:30, in 8:30 to 3, and high school, Rawlings and Gap, 9:30 to 4. We've worked with Mr. Shope, we've worked with Mr. Zaney. Everybody can make this happen in order to be able to have time to get our buses where they need to be on time, and also to hopefully provide a little additional time that we can do some more cleaning and sanitizing in between routes. And so we would strongly ask that you all consider a bell schedule proposed change for the remainder of the school year. Because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but I don't know that this is going to lessen this year. Even if it does, great. We can just continue on and make modifications down the road as we need to. Other options that we have discussed for your consideration and our discussion is, as I said, we can keep doing what we're doing. I don't know how much longer we will be able to keep those Band-Aids on the wounds at this point in time. And so we worked as a team to look at some temporary, and we want to emphasize the word temporary, virtual learning date proposals. We are in absolutely, positively no way advocating long-term virtual learning because first off, we know that the best instruction happens with children and teachers in the classroom. And so these would be, all of these options are short-term resets or pauses in order to help get all of our faculties and staff healthy and back into the classrooms, the same with our students. And so we developed 3 options. We've batted them around. We wanted to present all of the options to you. And then I will let you know the option that in the reasonings behind the one that was the consensus of the district teams. Option A would be to do temporary virtual learning from September 7th to the 17th. That encompasses 9 school days. Now, I am not counting Labor Day, since Labor Day is a holiday, and we're not counting weekends. And so that would be 9 school days of temporary virtual learning with no students in the building. Option B would be temporary virtual learning from September 7th to 15th. Students would return on a Thursday versus a Monday. That would give kind of a slow start to bringing back in, allowing us to see if there are any major spikes or trends in those 2 days instead of getting into a week and things rise again. That option gives 7 days with students out of the classroom. Another option that we discussed was September 7th to 10th. That would just encompass next week, which is only 4 days out of the classroom. With e-learning, virtual learning. And I do want to make a distinction that why we're not using e-learning is to not make a confusion if we have to go out on e-learning days based on hurricane or other inclement weather. The state has made a distinction in those two so that they're not confused with one another. So that's why we're talking about temporary virtual learning. I know it's semantics, but it is what it is. So the last one would be, the 4 days out of the classroom in the building, or out of the buildings. Okay. Through all of, question?
Not yet.
Through all of our discussions and looking with our administrators, the overwhelming consensus of them would be to go with option A, although we are ready to execute any option that we have. We will make, as you know, we will make it work with any of these options. But if they had their druthers, it would be to have the 9 days, because this would provide the ample amount of time coming off of a holiday weekend to get our current isolation and quarantine students and our staff healthy and back in the classrooms. It would allow the teachers to get everybody back on the same page instructionally, because they would be teaching all of their students at the same time via Teams, so that they can get everybody back together. It gives even more time for ample deep cleaning of our schools and buses, and it also gives us time to monitor the Supreme Court's decision on face coverings and make necessary adjustments if we need to. Because I have not been in tune to the news today. I don't know if they came out with their decision. I know this morning that they had not. But whatever that decision is, it will impact our quarantine, reduction of quarantine, because there are strings that come along with that. Either way, we're going to have to make some adjustments and modifications.
Is the parents still saying this, or are we just
We're not allowed to speak because this is a board workshop, and they're trying to give us information.
Your guest.
You can email or call. I will give you my telephone number, and you can call me. Okay,
Miss-
yeah, I will, seriously, I will give you my phone number, and you can call me when this is over, and then we can discuss it, okay?
Ms. Kinnear, just one quick question before you go any further. Are these the only options?
As I preceded this conversation with, the option to continue as we are is always on the table.
So we're gonna go, let's go through the.
Well, we need to hear what Mr. Pye has to
Yeah,
say
let's
too
go through
before
the
we
rest
make
of
a
the
decision.
Oh, correct.
And
Mr.
then we're
Pye,
gonna come
Mr.
back
Pye
and
is
we're
going
gonna discuss it
to,
all.
as soon as everything is presented, Mr. Pye is going to join in. Absolutely. That's always been the plan. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so let's get through the,
Okay.
go ahead.
If we were to go with any temporary virtual learning option, daily instruction will continue. We will continue to follow instructional schedules at the elementary, middle, and high school level. Those schedules, expectations, and other important informations will be communicated out by the schools in multiple fashions. The teachers are going to will have, much like we did, if you remember, when we came back from the holiday break last year, we did a 2-week virtual learning option. Teachers were given the option to either teach from their classrooms if they felt their schedules were allowed them to do that, or from home, and we would again extend that option to them. We would suspend extended day services because naturally the goal is to have our buildings free of students so that we have that time away from one another. No athletics or extracurriculars until we return to in-person instruction. So basically we press pause on everything. Food service will continue providing meals utilizing dedicated locations. Again, we've already talked about deep cleaning of classrooms and buses and the face coverings ruling. And it also gives us time to develop and communicate a plan for reducing quarantine options for staff and students. We're researching and developing systems in order to potentially do a 7-day option for staff and a 10-day option for students. And it also gives us time to continue with the installation of the air purifiers that fit on back order in our remaining classrooms and office spaces. And so we are continuing to go with that as well. And so with that, I will open it up, Chair Hughes, to questions and discussions.
May I ask a question, Ms. Hughes? I'm concerned about our children that have special needs, those who don't have sight, who can't hear, who might be autistic. Would we, if the teachers were in agreement, would we allow them to continue to come to the school?
We had, I don't know if Dr. Capoletti is in, she is in the house. But at this point in time, she and her staff, and Tony, you might be able to address this, she and her staff have been working on those situations and on ways to offer instruction through the virtual learning. But Ms. Robinson, that's certainly not out of the question and something that we can certainly look at and explore.
Those are a lot of my emails, of parents who have children that
Sure,
Or going through
absolutely.
that, and I just felt like I needed to bring that.
No, absolutely, that's why we're in a workshop.
Okay.
Okay. I think you need to turn it on.
It's not on.
Good evening. It certainly is a reason to be concerned, and at this time, many of our students with disabilities are on quarantine. Many of classrooms with students with disabilities have been closed for various reasons. They're in close contact with each other, hands-on kind of work. Some of our students can't keep masks on. So many of the students are quarantined as we speak, and some of the teachers and the adult supports that are necessary for close supervision to be safe, particularly in autism rooms. So it's a matter of safety, health, instruction. And so our special ed teachers are very good at the virtual instruction. We have a plan that will try to work with kids who really don't interact with the device well on one-on-one kind of situations. That's why we call it individualized. And also, I've been working with an option to provide compensatory opportunities. So when conditions are prime for learning, that's when we will provide more compensatory kind of services when the child's available to learn, the proper teachers in place, the adult supports there. Just makes for a conditions for learning, what we call conditions for learning are optimal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No, I appreciate that, Ms. Robinson, thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions, comments? Go ahead. Ms. Wimberly. Yep, go ahead.
Flip a coin.
Mr. Farnsworth?
No, nobody wants to chat about that one, huh? Listen, let's have a conversation about it. I think looking at the numbers that we saw, looking at what's going on in our district right now, we obviously have some major issues. So I personally would tell you, I do think we have to take some sort of action. We've got to do something. And so whether we're looking at something like this, I would see this as the ability to kind of breathe a little bit. We've got 4,500 kids in quarantine right now. So I think it gives us a chance to breathe. It presses the reset button a little bit. I think my concern would be what mitigation or what happens after we come back and this same thing starts happening again. How do we, have you guys talked about that? What are the options? What are the thoughts there to make sure we don't get in this exact same situation a couple weeks from now?
Yes, sir, we have, and unfortunately, and we'll let Mr. Pye jump in if he'd like as well. We have talked about that. Unfortunately, there's no guarantee. We can, based on, and I'm hoping he's learning a lot to be able to come back and give alternate strategies. And we will just have to take that case by case, but we're not allowed to continue in a temporary, I want to say e-learning, but I can't. Temporary virtual setting for extended periods of time. So we will have to be able to, whether that's putting classrooms, which we're doing now, whether that's putting whole schools, which we can certainly do prior to moving back into a full district opportunity.
What does that look like? And again, I don't even want to open up this can of worms, but it is what it is. Let's say between now and then, we were to look at some type of mask mandate. And again, this might be for Nurse Santa Maria. What does that look like as far as quarantine procedures? Would we essentially, in theory, have less quarantine? So let's say we run into the same variant, the same spread right now. Would we have less students, in theory, in quarantine if we were in masks?
So depending on the setting, potentially yes. Again, if they're 3 feet apart and both masked, we don't need to quarantine them. They're not considered close contact. So in some settings, that would certainly be possible. In others, where the 3 feet is not even possible, let alone 6 feet, it still wouldn't have much of an impact. I think what the more important, broader aspect to look at is that it would help with the spread. We are seeing more so than we ever did before, multiple cases in a classroom where a student is being quarantined because of close contact and within a few days testing positive. They're being directly exposed and they're testing positive. So I think what would be helpful is if there were masks in place, we would ultimately see less cases and therefore see less close contacts and less quarantines.
While you're still there, Amanda, I had got a question they sent. Do post-COVID students who have antibodies similar to vaccines have to quarantine if they are exposed to a positive student?
If they are within 90 days of their COVID infection, they're released of their need to quarantine, just like those who are fully vaccinated. But it's a proof of an antigen test or a rapid test, not proof of antibodies. That is what releases them. So if they have antibodies from a possible COVID infection a year ago, the health department doesn't allow us to use that to clear them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask, because it's our workshop and we're trying to get everything we can possibly understand, if we go back, like has been mentioned, the lunchrooms at the high school are the kiosk, even if there's many kiosks, it's still so crowded. What would we do to help stop the herding that where there's so many? Is there something that y'all have thought of to decrease that on the high school level? And you can't contact trace when they're all like that either. And I hope I asked that the right way.
I think at the high school level for ILT, we're looking at situations where if we put our students back in mandatory lockdown ILT, where our students go back to their second period class to have lunch, again, we can't socially distance those students. They're not going to have masks on, of course. They're going to be eating in close proximity to each other. When we do ILT open, we have an opportunity to spread our students out across the entire campus. They can utilize the cafeteria and all the different classrooms, and quite frankly, there's more space for them to spread out. So that's kind of the good, the bad, and trying to go down the middle of the road, what's going to be best for all of our high school students.
Thank you.
Ms. Canaris?
And I won't speak for Mr. Zaney, but if we could get Sodexo more fully staffed, we might be able to even increase the number of kiosk offerings that we have during those ILTs in order to spread them out even further. Would you say, Mr. Zaney?
Ms. Canaris, when I asked you about were there any other options,
Yes, ma'am.
I was referring to, like the high schools would go every other day like they did last year, but the elementary schools could still go to school full-time. That's why I was asking you, was that an option that y'all talked about?
Hybrid?
No, high school. We said that, last year I think y'all let the high school kids go,
Right.
stagger schedules, but the elementary and all got to still go.
At this point in time, there has been, across the state, there has been no talk about us being able to get permission to use a hybrid schedule. And so that we have looked at that. We did talk about that, but that is not getting traction at the state level to be allowable.
Okay. Well, we gotta wait till Mr. Pye talks, I guess.
So, do we feel like, I know it seemed like last year we were doing so many things to try to help, the cleaning in between the classes. I mean, I just remember the students were cleaning their desks. Have we implemented, or are we considering bringing back as much of that? Obviously, we had the plexiglass. I know we've said that we aren't necessarily bringing that back. That's fine, but just all things along those lines. Is there anything else we can do if we were to, if we go virtual and when we come back? Because I'm kind of thinking along the same lines of Mr. Barnsworth, that I hate to see us go virtual and stay home for this time period only to come back and end up in the same situation. Right. So I feel like we need to come back prepared with as many things as possible to try to prevent that.
Mm-hmm. And we have had conversations about plexiglass. And we have it available for it to be installed if we feel like we need to.
Okay, well, I'm not
I know,
trying
you're-
to make a plea for plexiglass.
I
I'm honestly
understand.
not, but I'm just saying, I know there were things we were
Yes,
doing.
right.
So what along those lines could we do again? Like the kids were cleaning their desks transitioning between classes. I mean, just anything like that. Are there options that we could try to do this year? I know we talked about, not using our cafeterias. I mean, just those type of things. Are there things that we think we could do that would help?
We absolutely can, Ms. Wimberly, because, we are, the teachers and the students, many of them are continuing to clean in between their classes. We can make sure that is even more increased. We can definitely work with Sodexo on cafeteria services. Right now, we have many classes that are just walking through socially distant. I'm talking mainly at the elementary level. So walking through socially distanced to pick up their trays and then go to various areas to eat. They're rotating in and out of the cafeteria in order to have smaller groups. And we can expand on those, we can add to those to do any of those things. Yes, ma'am.
Decreasing transitions. I mean, I know some schools had staggered bell schedules. I'm just saying,
Absolutely.
if we could use this time to try to implement as much of that as possible, and I just think that if we decide to do this, we need to make the time as valuable as possible so that we don't end up in this same
Absolutely.
situation again.
We totally agree.
Right, sure.
We absolutely.
Nobody
totally
wants
agree.
that, I know.
Yes.
Ms. Canarins, Mr. Pye had assured us that all air purifiers are in all the classrooms now. True?
No,
True?
no.
There are some classrooms without air purifiers because of back order situations, just as soon, and Dr. Huggins is here for that. Just as soon as they come in, they are getting put in instructional spaces first, and then we're moving down the line, and we'll get them in offices, et cetera.
Well, I think with the purification that we've done to our air conditioners and all of that, and with the air purifiers that have been put in, that we've certainly taken steps already
Yes,
this
ma'am.
year, and that possibly, like you said, eating back in the classroom,
Yes, ma'am.
whatever. We've got to keep the kids in school. That's the bottom line.
And as I said, we do not disagree with that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
We are looking at, we're looking at cleaning. Have we looked at companies to come in and help us to clean, to do some of this deep cleaning that needs to be done with the
Yes, ma'am, we
ducts
and
and all of that kind of stuff? to make
We
sure
are,
that's
we are
clean?
reaching out, and what our thought process is for some of our larger schools, to bring those companies in to tackle those schools so that Ms. Batten and her crowd can work with the other schools so that we can make it as efficient as we possibly can. So we're looking at companies for that. We're having Mr. Shope explore, are there any contractors, bus contractors that we can contract out with to provide us additional buses to help with lessening the numbers on our current routes, et cetera. So, and Julie, if you have anything you want to add to the cleaning? You good?
Would they be ready right off the bat if
Yeah.
tonight we say, let's do this? You could have them ready this, okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Do we,
One more question. We have, we're working on the air purifiers and getting them in, getting them put in, getting physically here and then getting them put in. Also, what about the air conditions for the buses?
Mr. Shope? Thank you.
It's my understanding they're here and we're just we've got to get them installed. Is that correct?
No, ma'am, the company that, they're manufactured in North Carolina, and the buses have to go there to be retrofitted. So far, they've returned one to us. They're they have possession of 2 others, and we're waiting for them and their backlog of equipment and scheduling to get the buses through. So I
You have to
have
take
one
the bus
back.
to them?
Yes. I mean, they'll come pick it up. The
I know
the
it
vendor
won't
comes
without
and
a
picks it
bus.
up, but it has to go to
We do
North
have some
Carolina.
spare buses that we
Is
utilize
that
when
not
they're done.
something that, I mean, I don't know, I'm just asking, is that not something that our maintenance guys can do, is put the air
They can't
conditioning? I
retrofit,
mean,
no. It's a major installation to do that. They would not be able to retrofit and do that, no.
Okay, so approximately, how many do we have that we are utilizing that does not have air conditions?
25 district
Twen-
buses and about 20 more state buses.
So we have 46 buses that does not have an air condition.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I was under the impression that it was a whole lot less than that, so I'm glad you
The
clarified that.
state is in the process of replacing their old buses, and all the new buses come with air conditioning, and ours are subject to retrofit, in the retrofit process.
I'm just thinking about if we think about this mask thing and these kids have to be on those buses, and right now, the kids have to be on buses with masks. That's what I'm thinking about, and that's unbearable. I mean, and that's a lot to ask.
It's brutal. It really is. When it's hot like that, it's brutal.
And Dr. Huggins is,
The mask is a state requirement, yes.
Dr. Huggins will provide an update on purifiers and the HVAC systems.
So at this point, we've installed all of our air purifiers that we've received up to this point for those on back order. We put in 1,640 of those to be installed. We went ahead and sent a request out to all of our administrators to make sure that what are your additional needs, because not only are we covering or trying to cover classroom space, but we're also trying to cover office space and other additional areas. So today we have 463 more for a request. We are anticipating 200 of those to arrive on this Friday. We'll go ahead and get those installed immediately. And then the following week, we anticipate more of that order. Remember, once again, those cover approximately 2,000 square feet per unit, and most of our classrooms are generally 800 to 850 square feet. So those filters also do not need to be changed for approximately 2 years, which is one of the reasons we went with that particular unit. They're very strong and very good units. Anything you want to add to that, Tony?
Did ESSA pay for that? ESSA money pays for that too?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr.
And then in
Huggins?
regards to our HVAC, I can go ahead and give you some updates, and Tony, you can elaborate on any of these that you want. But we've reset our building automated systems at BAS to allow for 2 hours of air flush before the facilities are occupied, and then 2 hours after occupation to achieve 3 changes of air of equivalent clean air supply. We've also improved the level of air filtration as much as possible without significantly reducing the airflow. We've also moved from MERV 8s to MERV 11s, which are standard filters, and then in some of the units, we have increased to MERV 13s for those units that can handle those. We've also included bipolar ionization units, which is at DuBose and Knightsville, and then our newer schools already have those, Austin Bailey, Sires, Sandhill, Rollins Middle School. Bipolar ionization units were installed in those during their construction periods. We've also once again installed those purifiers throughout the district. We've installed once again 1,640 at this time. And we're following all of the ASHER guidelines for equipment and system specifications and verifications for the year. And we've requested an additional $7 million in ESSER funding to replace our HVAC systems in 4 of our older schools in the district at this time. So quick update
May
on
I
that.
ask a quick question? First of all, thank you for doing it in the offices, because that's our staff, our nurses, and on and on.
And so we increased from classrooms now. As one of the last board meetings, someone asked if we could put those in offices, therefore an increase in number for these, and that's what we're trying to do. As soon as we get them in, we're installing them.
What about the restrooms? Do we need them in there, or are they not in there long
We've been
enough?
having discussion about that now. That is certainly, with the order that we've placed again, we want to make sure that we can cover as many areas as possible. That is something, certainly one up for discussion.
So
What
would
we
that
were
be the
looking at for
hallways
that
that
were
do?
areas where we could not socially distance, where it could not be guaranteed, and for where people would be in a space for more than 15 minutes.
Like a hallway, like when they're changing classes?
No, ma'am, we have not done hallways. We have done classroom spaces. We've looked at office spaces. We do have them in gymnasiums. We have them in fine arts classrooms, those type facilities, but not in the hallways itself.
I just want
At this point.
I just want to be sure in the purification, I think it's a really good conversation, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding from air purification, obviously the goal there is to stop the very real spread of this virus. But when we look at quarantine and isolation and close contact, are there any stipulations or caveats as far as the air purifiers that change our process or methodology?
No.
Okay. So again, and just going back to what I was saying earlier, talking about, in what Ms. Wimberly is saying, I think everybody's saying the mitigation strategies for when we get out of this thing, I agree. Air purifiers, we need them, they gotta be there, they do very real work and they're great. But I would like to know what our very real mitigation strategies are, because again, if we get back to 4,500 kids in quarantine like that, we're gonna be right back in this situation. And it doesn't matter if we have air purifiers or not.
Is there a reason y'all can't get a few questions for some concerned parents here? Like, you can't make time for that?
Sir, it's not a matter of time. This is not a board meeting. We do that at a board meeting. This is a board workshop.
I'm just saying, we've heard everything you have to say, but this is concerned parents here. I just want to ask the questions in a very calm, respectful manner.
Madam Chair, I would say if folks are able to be respectful, I appreciate that they are here this evening. I would say this is absolutely a board workshop held in the public. But I personally, and again, I can't speak for you, this is our workshop, I'm okay with the folks that are here if they would like to respectfully bring up some of their questions. I'm just telling, that's me personally, again, I can't make that up for the board.
I have no problem with that.
If we can, let us get through the whole presentation, and then in the end, what we'll do is we'll let you come up and we'll let you talk, but just let us get through this, because we may be able to answer. These are just the suggestions. These are not necessarily what is cut in stone or etched in stone. So just let us get through this and let us finish the process. And then when we go back into our board meeting, which we will do right after this, then we'll allow you to come up and speak to us. Okay? So just let us get through this part of it, and then we can have that discussion. Okay. Now,
I did have another question, sorry.
Okay.
I didn't mean to cut you off there.
That's okay.
Do we know ballpark, you gave us a few different options there with different dates. Do we know ballpark the number of students that would come out of quarantine if we use those different dates?
She said she got to give her a minute.
I guess the question is, if we do the full 2 weeks until the 17th, does that put pretty much all of the 4,500 back in our schools?
Would have to be close.
So the current students that are out on quarantine as of today, for the most part, aside from those who have household exposures who may be in that longer 24-day period, would for the most part have returned. But obviously we will be in school for the next few days, and so there will continue to be contacts that are identified, and so they may not return at that point, depending on when their exposure happens and when we're notified of the case.
But we don't know just even ballpark what that looks like. If it'll take a few minutes, that's fine, and we can look at it here in a little bit.
Sure, just give me.
I'd be interested to see if we wait till the 17th, are we getting back 3,500 kids, that sort of information.
Well, I still say that might be 4,500 out, but we still got 22,000 in.
So as of right now, all of the students that are currently under quarantine, with the exception of 51, would be returning on the 17th, between now and the 17th. There'd be 51 students out to date with current quarantines, not including anyone that has been quarantined today or will be quarantined this week.
if we waited till the 17th?
Yes,
Go ahead,
ma'am.
Ms. Rinkley.
Do we have a breakdown, the 5,000 students who are absent right now today due to COVID? Do we have a breakdown of the levels, elementary versus middle versus high?
Of the students who are under quarantine? Yes, I mean, we have them all by school, so we can total them up from the dashboard and figure out how many are at the elementary level, how many are at middle, and how many are at high.
Well, I'm just wondering if you know, just thinking about, is there a trend? Do you think we're seeing more at any certain level?
Not really. I think it kind of really all depends on the reports that we get. So unfortunately, that's another delay that we have in the contact tracing process, is if we're not notified right away of the case. And sometimes we see that parents at the elementary level, report that information to us right away. Sometimes it's a little bit slower depending on the school, depending on the individual. So I would say from my standpoint, it appears that it's pretty universal across the board, but we can certainly break those numbers down if we need to.
Does anybody else have any other questions? No? Okay, we have another portion to this presentation? Is there
No,
another
ma'am,
portion?
that's it. We have,
Mr. Pye.
Mr. Pye.
We just have Mr. Pye. Do you mind if we take just a 2-minute break? And then we come back? I think
say two?
somebody needs to,
Did you say 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
I thought you said 10.
So we just need just a couple of minutes
Sure.
break, so, and then we'll come back, and then if we can hear from Mr. Pye, and then we can have this discussion as a whole with everything that we know, and then we can move on,
Perfect.
hopefully.
That's great.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
We'll be
ma'am.
right back.
Thank you.
Are we putting the numbers back in when they come back? Are we putting the numbers that went out? Because it's, they're virtual? Are we removing them?
From the dashboard?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, and Ms. Santa Maria can
Okay.
explain that in a jiffy.
Thank you.
So yes, to answer your question, that current column for all of the 4 categories is reduced anytime students return.
Okay.
So with the year-to-date will always increase because it's just cumulative total number. But the current, it fluctuates depending on how many leave and how many come back.
That's great, thank you.
And I do have those numbers broken down. So current positive cases at elementary, 273, positive at middle, 127, and positive at high, 126. And current quarantined at elementary, 1837, at middle, 1506, and at high, 1214.
So we have more in quarantine. And then we have that are really sick. Call. And
Sorry.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
God, no.
Well, I was just going to say, sorry to ask you to do one more thing, but I know Mr. Farnsworth asked about option A, how many students would be back. Could you give us the information for B and C as well,
Sure.
please?
I just
Thank
have
you.
to
All right,
put on
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
In doing some quick research and just looking over some items, so, and maybe I misunderstood earlier, but Ms. Canaran, so on the guidelines for quarantine
Yes, sir.
and for students coming back from quarantine,
Yes, sir.
am I right to say that there are potentially options that we as a board or a district can look at to lower that time frame?
Yes, we cannot not isolate and quarantine, but we can look at different number of days that an individual, particularly for quarantine. And I'm going to rely on my friend who just moved over there if I need her. But so, for example, if we were to move to, right now we are quarantining for 14 days, period. We were looking at an option to move the quarantine time for staff to a 17, sorry, I'm not increasing it, I promise, to a 7-day quarantine period. There are some strings that come attached to that per CDC and DHEC, in that the individual must have a negative rapid or PCR test. No home tests are allowed. That test has to be can be taken no earlier than 5 days from the last exposure. They do have to submit a copy to the district nurse or her designee. So there is a tracking process that we need to have in place. And the individual must have been asymptomatic for the entire 7-day period. And so right now, the guidelines for CDC is that they return with a mask and that they socially distance for the additional 7 days. So, and we wanted to put a note there that what we're seeing in the community and hearing in the community, that testing availability is limited at this time just due to our community spread. And as you all know from your Thursday data that we send out, we do have a large spread in the community. So that's impacting that. Amanda, is there anything we need to add to that, or we can come back to that? If we were to move to a 10-day instead of a 14-day quarantine option for students, the student must be asymptomatic for the entire 10 days with daily at-home monitoring. They would return at the 10-day mark and would have to wear a mask and be socially distanced for the remaining 4 days. And they would need to continue self-monitoring until 14 days from the exposure. It shortens the quarantine days, and it may increase the number of cases and exposures because it doesn't require a negative testing to return. Does that help, Mr. Farnsworth?
It does, and so those options we're able to implement that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we can, and we would utilize, if we set pause and reset, we would utilize that time to get all of this information in play and in place and communicated across the district.
Ms. Cornelius, oh, I'm sorry.
You
Ms.
know where
Cornelius,
I'm-
what's
you know
the,
where I'm coming from.
what's the quote-unquote definition of at-home monitoring?
Ms. Santa Maria?
I don't know why I keep sitting down. So at-home monitoring would be a self-report or a parent report that the student's been asymptomatic. There's no formal reporting process, there's no paperwork to fill out, it's just basically the honor system. You're welcome.
Amanda, don't sit down yet, because I just got another one. Nurse needs to tell you the numbers back in school at each virtual break, not just the longest one. Now, what is?
Yep, that's what Mr. Farnsworth just asked, I just did that math, so I have that here for you.
I'm sorry, sorry, missed that one.
No, that's okay. So if we went with option A, there would be 37 students still out. Again, that's just today's numbers. There will be more added between now and when we close, if we close. Option B, 78, and option C, 271.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Pye, I believe that I'm going to now turn the floor over to you.
Issues, were you going to tell them about the card? No. Oh.
Well, while we're waiting on Mr. Pye, going back to those quarantine options.
Yes, sir.
So that's not something that we, as a board, implemented, correct?
Correct.
So is that something that we would need to vote on to implement that, the options that you're talking about now?
You don't have to. We can look at that and have that ready. If that is the will, if that is the desire of the board, then we can have that ready to be implemented when we return, if we take a pause when we return. We just need a little time to get the parameters out there and ready.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. I think we're trying to.
He doesn't know how to work those things too good. You think he's having computer, he's, he always says that.
Mr. Guthrie, would you speak so that we can see if we hear you?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, we hear you loud and clearly. Mr. Pye, would you try again?
Mr. Pye, this is Lee. If you can hear me, would you give me a thumbs up on my phone, please?
you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm on then.
Yes,
I
sir.
don't know how I got on, but I pressed every button on my phone. So you ready?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, first of all, listening to the presentation, staff, you did a wonderful job gathering lots of information. Board members, I feel for you because that's an awful lot to take in at one time. For us, we work with these numbers every day, and sometimes we might misgauge the understanding level from where we are putting these numbers together to how you might be receiving them all at once. But I think you asked some fabulous questions because I was getting ready to ask most of the things that some of you asked. I was going to ask the same thing about, from our discussions, we actually had determined, I felt strongly, that the thing about the 7 to 10 days, that's being done all over South Carolina. I found that at my meeting this morning. So Dorchester 2 will be doing that. And if I can find a way to make it less than that, I'm going to do it. As long as we're in, we're not endangering children or our staff members, but every day counts to get people back in their jobs. A lot of our staff are out because of their children. And so we've got to look at every way we can to reduce that. And and hopefully, if masks are reinstated, well, then I think, going back to Ms. Wimberly's question about the difference from this year and last year, that certainly is the game changer. But the other, we'll try to come back normal with caution. Well, guess what? Now it's time to do the caution part. We did the normal part, and I'm really concerned that is not working. The numbers are going up. I've learned over the last few days, and particularly today, this variant is affecting 2.5 times more people than it did last year. And also the domino effect of contact tracing has produced that it now, instead of doing maybe 50 people at the end, is affected by someone with COVID. It could be as much as, at the end of the cycle, 300 plus people. So it really is significantly causing a problem with the spread of it. So I'm looking at our spread numbers and thinking about, they're high, but I'm real concerned about the amount of time kids are losing for instruction because they're out of the classroom. But what's really concerning me is not having staff to be able to do the protocols, to monitor them, and to teach the children and take care of them, like the nurses being out, puts us at high risk. Other people can put Band-Aids on and things like that, but our nurses are specially trained for emergencies and other things that's still occurring. In spite of COVID, we still have to run our schools, and there are a lot of issues there that we do just normally that we're taking people out as everything is focused on that. As far as employees are concerned, there's nothing I can do about the shortage short of I have authorized directors as late as last week, early part, or the week before, that I want to contract with several bus companies in Charleston that do things. I know, money is not the option. We have the extra funds right now, keep getting children to school safely and building back the learning there that we want to occur. I want us to hire, get them to contract with us to maybe run 20 buses, 30 buses, 40, whatever it takes to make up the shortage that we have, to take away these double routes, reduce the numbers of students on the buses, and so we have ample routes. Almost at least exhaust that. So that's one thing. As far as the food service is concerned, the ILT, there's no question. We need more kiosks. We need much more. We have one on every corner. But who's going to staff it is the problem. There's not enough staff. I've authorized the payment of any employee in Dorchester 2, such as bus drivers, extended day workers, or anyone else, to be employed during that block of time in the 3 schools, and we will take them on. I also have received from two of our parents a wonderful suggestion. I think board members, you may have gotten it later. I got it early this morning, and I appreciate those parents thinking of our concerns and coming up with solutions and not just the problem. They brought up these solutions that there are people that they know of, including their own family, that are willing to volunteer 1 or 2 days a week for a period of time. That would be on the regular list. There would just be put wherever we need them. I'm sure they were talking about classroom instruction, but I think they would be willing to serve in other capacities helping get kids in and out of the schoolhouse so teachers are free to be in the room to work with the kids. And when they get there, I think they're willing to they help maybe serve food if that's what we need. I'm doing those lunch blocks. We have enough volunteers that they come each day. And when you deal with volunteers, you can't really get them to come. But right now, if nobody's there, that's one thing. But at least we've had some people to help us to cover, and we can use additional staff who will go out helping to teach classes, but perhaps pull together enough people to fill in those stations. So at least 4 of our schools on ILT to make sure they're running smoothly. I've observed it, and I think it's running about as good as it can run. The problem is, you're right, there should not be any really long lines. Last year, we got it down to 10 or 15 minutes. Everybody was out of the lines and in their classrooms. So we could do a staggered dismissal, which I think we might still be doing in some schools, to let maybe a grade level, 9th graders, 10th graders, whatever they do upstairs, A hall, B hall, D hall, what it might be, to break it down so we have smaller numbers coming down and getting them through as the next wave comes down. We just have to exhaust all those kinds of things. Elementary is our best scenario because the classes in elementary are pretty reasonable with the exception of a few grade levels and a few schools. But in many schools, it is well within the reason of doing the 6 feet of social distancing. 3 feet in most classes in the elementary, as far as I know, all that I know of. But if we go back to serving the children back in the classrooms, we should use the lunchroom to put some of the bigger classes in that doesn't have the social distancing, gyms, and maybe even our fine arts program. I don't want to take away from any of those folks, but folks, we have got to get these children read, write, and do arithmetic, and the best way to do it is have them here. And so whatever we put in place, I think it's going to be lots of things, because there's no silver bullet. Probably the mask will be the greatest thing, but I'm going on the premise that may not happen. So if it doesn't happen, what else could we possibly do? And parents, like I said, we've gotten some good suggestions, and we're taking them all to heart. I'm sorry that many people feel that we aren't trying. I know I can't try any harder, and I had one accuse me today that I must be laughing at all this. Well, that was a crude remark to make to me, and they know me, so I won't laugh about it such as this. This is very serious, and I hear it from both sides. I agree with both sides, and our community is very divided. But I have to go back to what's in my heart, and my children come first. Yes, I want them to learn. That's why I'm in the profession. I'm supposed to oversee that. But I also have a definite duty to provide a safe environment for the children and let parents know they can be at work and do things knowing their children are safe at school, the best we can do. So as we've done safety measures for security, I feel this is no different. As we do close the schools during inclement weather, same thing. We're doing all that to protect our children, to keep the buses off the roads in high winds and things. So I'm looking at the whole picture. It's just so many things that you could hear. I was thinking that I was getting overwhelmed, and I'm the superintendent, and I've been dealing with this for 50-something years. The bottom line is it's just so much, so many details that have to be communicated, dealt with, and sometimes there's a misunderstanding. I could tell by some of the questions that some of the board members had. My staff can tell you, every question that I get, whether it be from a parent or a board member or whomever in the community, that is discussed with our staff. I'm asking them to find the answers. Just like now, when we're on the phone, and I'm waiting. I know they were caught by surprise when Mr. Barnsberg asked the numbers by grade. I think it was him asked numbers by the grade levels that we had out, and which grade level may be, or maybe it was Wimberley, which grade level was showing the most. I didn't know that. That's something I have not looked at. However, I don't have the sheet of paper here in front of me. You just take the day's count. You got your schools, take all your elementaries, add it up, take your middle schools, add it up, take your high schools, add it up, and that's the answer to the question. And that's what they did. But I, from here, was texting all my staff saying, somebody get the calculator out, look at your sheet, and add them up. It's just what it is. But everyone is frustrated there. They're trying to cover so many different bases that sometimes the obvious may not be there, and whether it makes a difference or not, knowing those numbers, I don't know. But I was surprised. I just knew the high schools were going to lead the race because they're more crowded. There's definitely less social distancing, transitions and all. So I thought that was a surprise number for me. So that doesn't make it right, but it does give us some insight that maybe we put so much emphasis on the class sizes, which unfortunately the growth of students as we came back this year, high school grew about 300-something kids over our projections. Middle is probably about 100. Again, I don't have the paper in front of me, but I look at those numbers every day. And then we have, an elementary is still like 700 short. So that's why we were able to cover more bases there. I don't know how many elementary teachers we're missing, but we were missing none when school started. And with those numbers, we should, we were able to move some around and try to cover the spots as far as everything was covered. But I don't know how many of the 9 are elementary. So, but my concern is the high schools were already short. A few that we couldn't hire, maybe 2 at the high school level, 3. But then that's where the growth was, and so it might be another half dozen, 8 teachers short there. So high schools could be as much as 10 short at the high school level. Elementary probably is okay with teachers, and that's the number one number, and second to the nurses. I'm just so upset about nurses quitting. I don't blame them. I'm also concerned about they have their own personal issues and reasons, and they get sick and they have to take time off. If it's a big, large school, say like DeBost and Gregg, and those schools where there's one nurse and 1,200 to 1,300 kids, who's going to do all that? And these people are working they're working the backside off, and that's just to keep up with normal nursing. And you put the pandemic stuff on top of it, and then you take them out of there, and another nurse has to cover their school and that one. You're asking for the impossible, and that's how contact tracing could get behind. That's a lot of things there that we're dealing with, because there's shortages in every employment area. They're all from outside the nurses and teachers, all the classified positions, people are going to the highest paying one. And that's why some have less openings than others, but it's still causing us a problem. The cleaning, there's definitely companies out there that can help us. I told them to take care of that. I told them, I'm really aggravated about the purifiers not being able to get here any sooner because they're held up in wherever country they're coming from. But the bottom line is, I want them the day they arrive. They arrive at 9 o'clock that morning. I don't want nobody to go to bed till they're all put in. So that means we're going to have to use our little skeleton crew of maintenance people, but we're also going to have to make that top priority and bring in a bunch of other people, even if they have to be volunteers. And I may be out there, but they're not hard to do, to put up. It's just, a lot of them still put up. I think it was several hundred according to Dr. Huggins' report. So that's just kind of my reflections on this. What would I like to see naturally? I'm going to tell you now, I think without the mask, there is no promises what tomorrow holds. It's just our number is high, and it's going higher and higher, and I expect this to be a big outbreak after Labor Day. So that's why I'm really worried about the extension of time, and that's what I think I heard from our principals when I was on that call. And all of them, I think every single one of them chose option A, was what they wanted us to present. And as a matter of fact, many of them said that should be the only option. I felt like the board needs to understand, based on what their questions they're asking, what do the answers, does it fit one model better than another one? Of course, time is on our side for getting these things that we want done in place to help mitigate this. But again, there's no guarantee. My concern is if we don't do something, children who are coming back on quarantine on September the, let's say 6th or 7th, whatever day of the week that is, the 8th, they're going to be going out for another 10 days. I mean, how long is this going to go on? And so parents still have to deal with child care issues, the loss of learning, lots of things that they're seeing on their side. It's still going to be there. This is just something we cannot control. It's bigger than us. I'm here with, there are about 65 of the 79 superintendents at this meeting, and I'm hearing all over major problems, and worse than anything we've encountered yet. What makes me worried that it could get worse down the line. There was one district that's smaller than us actually has seen in 2 days in a row now a decline in their numbers. So it means it might be peaking, and I think one of our board members shared that with me. They heard from some source of theirs that perhaps it was speaking. So those are the things we're still trying to connect with as we talk to the medical professionals we're dealing with. Of course, DHEC today spoke to us, and they got blistered. The superintendent said, y'all keep changing your mind, keeping it back on the school districts, and we just need somebody to tell us what's going on, and y'all need to get your head out of the sand. That's basically what was told to them. It was almost embarrassing. I felt sorry for the woman, but she represents a major part of our state agencies that are giving advice on this, and so we want it to be right. We want to be timely. We want to be something that we can explain to people. And when I don't understand it, how am I going to explain it? So that's sort of the issues as I see. I know it sounds like I'm rambling here, but it is just what it is. You've heard all the questions the board members asked, and all the emails that I've received in the last week, probably 100 plus, and sharply divided. But like I said, I did get those two today that did offer up to volunteer to help, and so if I open it up, we could do that. I know there's issues with checking people's references. SLED reports have to be done. We don't want anyone around our children that perhaps could do harm to them. And of course, we screen all the people that we hire, and sometimes it doesn't work out like we like it to work out, and they have to be put on the road quickly. We won't tolerate that. Volunteers, you have less control over, and of course, it's like bringing more people into the building that aren't part of the organization's protocols to try to make things happen. So I think they'll half a day of training if they're willing to give that up. I do want us to utilize that. If we don't have two parents, that's two positions somewhere that might be filled. So I was excited about that, and I still ask that people continue to give us solutions. No matter whether we take this or we don't take it, I am saying as superintendent that I have to listen to what my people have found out, what I've heard, all hours point that we need a break in it. We have to have some kind of break. How long do you think it is? There's no magic answers. I tell you, the principals want the longest one. And I'm sure there's some of you that out there that don't want one at all. So we've got anything from none to whatever it was, 16 days. Of course, when we cut back on the quarantine time, that should drop that number of school days. I think that it won't not be that number. That's kind of weekends and all. So, Julie, if I could get you to reiterate what that 7 and 10 day rule will look like, because I'm saying, superintendent, unless the board disagrees, I'm authorizing that today. Well, we've got to get off this other stuff because we're not being supported by DHEC or anybody else. And I think we've got to try to keep these kids in school, whether it's now or whenever we come back. I'm back in what Ms. Wembley and Mr. Barnsberg said. This is one thing. We'll give you plenty of reasons why we have to do something. What kind of solace can we give our public? We can't give a guarantee because we're not in control of all the issues. But what are the odds? What are the likelihood? What's the chances of if we do this or that? What can we expect that's different? Because if we come back to what we're doing today, it will not be any different, I'm afraid. And then what? What would be our recourse again? We can't just keep stopping and going. And the state has already said we can't stop for any length of time. It has to be temporary. So we just can't take forever, no matter how much we would like to. Many of us do out there that would like to do that, but that's not an option. So, board members, you want to ask me a question? Now's the time.
Thank you, Mr. Pye. I just had a question for you, though. I want to know, during all your networking in Columbia with all the other superintendents, are there any new news or new suggestions of maybe ways that they're doing things that maybe we could incorporate into the way we're doing things here?
Well, all of our conversations have been people talking to us. And the two questions that have come up, and then, so there's a lot of issues that we've not had a chance. Hopefully this evening I can network with some superintendents closer, the ones I admire, and I know are doing things such as Greenville and some of those districts. I really want to know, how did you get to where you are? And I understand you think you're doing more. What is it you're doing, and how you envision that happening? And because I have I've only seen, there's only like 2 districts that's defying the governor's mandate. Only like 2 or 3 at best. They're just not doing it. And one of the districts who's declared they're defying it is not defying it. And you don't want a mask or wear a mask, you don't have to wear one. And so that is not a mask mandate, in my opinion. So it was half done, but it's reported by the press. It's totally. So it's all over the place. And just like us, I think that every week they're discussing with their board, and every morning I wake up to a new headline. I get the headlines from around the state on education every day, and every day they're having the same issues that we're having. So everybody's looking for answers, and they just aren't answers. And other states are worse than we are. So no, I'm learning, and I'm going to be here till at least midday tomorrow. And I think tomorrow we have some. Matter of fact, we have some roundtable discussions, and I think that's where we will get some more information.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pye. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Pye? Ms. Crosby?
Does anybody else go ahead?
Ms. Wimberly?
Well, first, just to clarify, you said, I think at the beginning, that you are planning to implement the change in the quarantine times, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Yes, okay.
Yes, ma'am. And I mean, too many other districts are doing it, and they're doing it, and they didn't really convince me that I've only been doing it long enough to really prove what a difference it makes, because we've got nothing to go against hardly. But with every day us growing as much as we're growing, hundreds a day, that's got to cease. I mean, when you've got 20% of the kids out going on 21, if we don't do something after we get back after Labor Day, it could be 30%, 35, a third of the students. These kids, when they miss and they're coming in at different times, it's impossible to ask the teacher to catch them all up. You know what I'm saying? We're creating gaps in the classroom, and the children who are already struggling and have had lost a lot are just getting further behind. So that's our concern. The best way to learn is to be in school, and that's why I'm not a big pusher of any virtual model at all. As you could tell, I'm not so capable with technology, because we couldn't even find the mute button on the phone, but we did get there. But we've got a lot of teachers, that's not the way they teach best, and we've got a lot of students, that's not the way they learn best. This is just strictly health related, that we really are concerned that eventually we're definitely not going to have teachers to teach the children. So what,
right.
What have we accomplished?
So is that something we could start immediately? And if so, do we know, and this might be a question for Ms. Santa Maria, do we know, would it apply to people already on quarantine right now, or?
You mean, okay, opportunity, can we start today? No, we can't start that today. We have to have at least 2 or 3 days. So I'm very concerned about the parents with their jobs, and also the parents with childcare. That's always been an issue since before time. Even when we went out for a hurricane for a week, people have lost their jobs over that because the employer won't let them off. And there's so much relaxation with a lot of people out there that they just brushed it off and moving on until they're touched within their families, and you can understand that. However, yes, I don't. Ms. Santa Maria will have to answer that question. She's done a miraculous job. Keep on again. I hate making a unilateral decision without actually sitting down with her. She knows I've been thinking of this for quite some time, but I've been convinced as of today that that's a small thing, but it's another thing that we're trying to show mitigation the best we can to see if we can't bring these numbers down. So,
Mr. Pye, I'm here. I'm here to answer. It's Amanda.
Yes, please answer.
So I think our intention as a team when we've had this discussion is that we need a little bit of time to put that in place. It's a big change from what we've been doing, and it requires a lot of extra parts and pieces to make sure that we're tracking it appropriately and make sure that we're maintaining that health and safety within the confines of what that criteria looks like. So I think if it is something that the board wants to move forward with, if the district wants to move forward with, we would need a little time to put that in place.
Like how much time?
Yeah. Good question.
Right.
Tomorrow.
I think our intention would be that we have the time for whatever that recess is, if
Right.
the board chooses to take a recess, that we would take that time and work
And
on the
would
planning.
any of the times be enough, you think, to implement it? Any option, A, B, or C?
I think if
Yes.
that's what the decision was, then we would have to make it
Okay.
work. But I think the ultimate goal of the break, in addition to that planning and cleaning piece, is also to get as many students out of their incubation period so that we're returning as safe as we possibly can.
Correct, right, that makes sense. So again, would it apply to current students on quarantine, or would it only be moving forward from the start date?
Again, I think it would depend on what that plan looks like. We have minimal students who would still be out on quarantine if we went with option A, so we could look at that and see if that's something that would be manageable to return them sooner and get in contact with all of those parents. It just is going to take a little bit of planning.
Sure, absolutely, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any more questions?
Not of her.
Mr.
I have
Pye?
one. I have one for Julie.
Okay, just a minute, let's finish with Mr. Pye.
Oh.
Anybody have any other questions for Mr. Pye?
Mr. Pye? Mr. Pye?
Can you hear me now?
Mr. Pye, this is Barbara.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I hear you, but can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you
sir.
hear me, Ms. Crosby?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Earlier,
Ask the
Julie
question.
was telling us that they were using everybody they could to help fill spots or sub or fill in whatever they needed to. Did that include math coaches as well?
Yes, I know they're the first that was used.
Excuse me?
They've done no math coaching. All of them were the first to be used. Interventionists, every day. All those were the first line people. Anybody that's a teacher, a certified teacher, and they don't have a case load per se, but they're doing other things like facilitators, interventionists, those folks, they're our first line people. Yes, we're taking them out of their job, and we hate that, but right now we've got to have supervision. We've got to have teaching, not just substitute. I want teaching and learning. I mean, we've got to have able-bodied people that know what they're doing. So that's our first line. Yes, ma'am. That's right.
Okay, just asking. Thank you.
Okay, anything else for Mr. Pye? Nope.
The one thing, quick thing, Ms. Crosby, if you know that's not so, as you were telling some others that you've got reports that they didn't see this or whatever, I need to know that. Because I've been told it is. I have not checked every room in the district, of course, but they know that this has been, we've been discussing this ever since school started, back even before school, that we have to have all these things in place. We've got all hands on deck. There is nobody exempt from this, and there's a possibility you're going to be hearing about me in a class because somebody's going to complain about the old man that's in the classroom that fell asleep because he couldn't keep up with these young kids. But all of us are willing to do it, and we love kids, and we know the purpose of it. None of us could replace the teacher, but I think we can make sure we have good instruction going on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pye. Before we move on, if I could just ask the board members if they would all do us a big favor and just turn their phones off so that we could concentrate on the matters at hand as opposed to everything else that's going on around us. That would be great. Yeah. Okay. So now that we've got that done, I think, Ms. Crosby, you had a question for Ms. Canarins? Oh, that was the question from Ms. Canarins, the one that you asked? Okay. Gotcha. Okay, okay. All right, are there any other questions regarding anything that we've discussed thus far? Does anybody have any comments? Discussions?
Is this the time that you want us to talk about which A, B, or C? Or not yet?
No, we'll go back into open session and have that discussion. So anything else? Nope. Does administration have anything else to present? Okay. Nope, I think we're good. Okay, so I need a motion to go back into open session. Motion made by Mr. Farnsworth, seconded by Mr. Mitchell. Any discussion? All in favor? 6. And Mr. Guthrie, are you still with us?
Aye.
7 and 0. Thank you, Mr. Guthrie. Okay. Now's the time, guys. Now we can have our discussion regarding everything that we spoke about in our workshop. But before I do that, I want to start off by saying, if I could get everyone who filled out a card to pass it down to the right end down here, and then if you could pick them up from the right end for me, that would be wonderful.
Well, you need to pass it in, though.
Thank you so much. How many you got? Okay. Now, before we go any further, I want to say what happened at the beginning of this meeting is we have on our agenda that there are no public comments. And when it was mentioned to have public comments allowed, we were inundated with text of people and emails of people who wanted to be here but did not come because there were no public comments. So they chose to listen virtually. Therefore, and another reason it is, if we were going to allow that, change the agenda to allow that, it should have been done at the very beginning of the meeting. So it was something that is actually unlawful to do, because we did not go in and we did not maintain or adjust the agenda to say that we were going to allow public comments at that point. Therefore, I cannot allow public comments. But, okay, listen. No. I'm sorry, he was wrong to say that, okay? Because that is not.
Madam Chair.
Wait a minute, shh.
Madam Chair, just a point of privilege.
Wait a minute.
Just very quickly, I want to be very clear. My statement earlier, and everybody here heard me say that was my personal belief. So I don't want anybody to think that was wrong, because what my concern is, and I appreciate you saying that all of us need to turn our phones off and all that sort of stuff. My concern is if any of us are going to take text messages and then read those aloud during a board meeting, that's essentially a public comment. And so again, I fully understand the legal aspects of it. And so I appreciate your decision as the board, but I just want to be very clear, that was my personal discussion, not anything more than that, so.
Well, the point is several things occurred that should not have occurred at the board meeting. And the only way to make sure that legally we are in the right to do what we are supposed to be doing in the conduction of a meeting is we cannot allow it. It is not on the agenda. Your questions will be answered. The questions that you have on your cards.
Can you just adjourn the meeting then and then allow us to ask you questions here, like in an open forum? Like, why do you have to have a meeting in session? Why can't we just ask you questions from person to person? Like, don't avoid it. Don't avoid it. Just let me have my concerns. We just wait till after this is over, talk outside. I'll talk with the media. They're going to still be here.
Well, maybe we should ask our
Madam
legal
Chair,
counsel.
point of order.
Okay, we have a point of order. So we're going to move on with the rest of this, and I will, if I could give this, Ms. Rayner, these cards, and if you will make sure that each one of these people that filled out cards have their questions answered, I would really appreciate it. And when you do that, if you could make sure that you copy every one of the board members in on that, so that we know that they have been answered, and then in response, if they have any questions that they would like to come back to us and talk to us about, they certainly can do that.
So you're not going to answer after?
Madam Chair, in order to further the conversation on the action item that we've got here, I'd like to make a motion that the board adopt option A as presented by the district.
Okay, I have a motion and a second on the floor that we adopt the option A as presented.
You guys are not going to do any decisions if you're not going to listen to the people who pay your paycheck.
Madam Chair,
Came up earlier.
point
She
of,
said, we continue as is, or we have these three options. Why is it continue as is listed as an option?
What solves your problem is if you
We've got to have order to continue the conversation. Okay, the next time that I have to call order so that we can finish the workshop, then I will have to ask you to be escorted out.
Yeah,
Because you don't want to listen to the people that pay your paycheck.
I don't want to do that right now, okay?
Because of us. And therefore, you
Okay. All right, I have a motion and a second on the floor for option number A. Do we have any discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, again, I want to be very clear, and I stated during the workshop, my hesitation, and you really can't put a caveat, or I'm looking at Julie, you really can't put a caveat, obviously, on this. I mean, maybe you could.
It's crazy.
To me, my hesitation again is not having the definitive mitigation strategies. And again, maybe that's something that if the district can tell me that, you know, on September 20th, we.
it's not going to go away. The option is keep
On,
all kids in
Madam Chair, point of order.
Please talk to her. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Farnsworth.
Again, I think my hesitation goes away a little bit if you were able to tell me on September 20th, items like ILT, transitions, you know, the social distancing type stuff. Because again, nobody here outside of, Madam Chair, I'm just waiting till everything kind of calms down a little bit.
Can I go for the vote? When can I call for the vote?
No, he's still talking.
This is all going on me.
Well, nobody wants A, so that's why.
You can do that if you want to do that. I just don't. Yeah, I think we should. Go ahead.
So just to be clear, outside of masking, because again, that's not something that I want to approach tonight. There's a lot of other stuff going on out there in the state right now as far as masking.
being recorded as well, because the whole thing is that we taxpayers pay the salary.
They're upset
I'm
because they don't
not.
want A.
I'm not. Madam Chair, point of order. Can we possibly do a recess for a little bit until the?
We'll take a few minutes recess, please. missing Ryan and Ashley.
Say it loud and proud.
Into open session.
I make that motion.
Motion made by Ms. Bowden, seconded by Ms. Robinson. Any discussion? All in favor?
I can't hear you.
7-0.
So, Madam Chair,
To go into open session, to go back into open session.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's on.
so if you don't mind, let me, if I can finish out that discussion.
Go ahead.
Again, the hesitation there, just looking at the mitigation strategies, I don't know if that's something you can discuss. I just want to make sure, again, that we don't, without the masking.
Yes, sir.
Which again is not, I don't think, up for conversation tonight. Can we put in place in that time period the mitigation strategies to do as much as we possibly can to ensure this doesn't happen again?
Yes, sir, absolutely. And while you were on recess, we were already making our list so that we can present it to you all. I know that we don't have another board meeting until September the 13th, but we can certainly provide you that information ahead of time. Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then the last point, just to make sure, again, the quarantine days that we talked about earlier, that will also be implemented for the 20th in
The
this
day of
case.
return. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, do we have any other discussion? Evan, do you have anything you'd like to add on this motion?
I do not.
Okay. All right, no further discussion, so I have a motion and a second. All in favor? 2. All against?
Thank you.
Evan, what's your vote? Are you there, Evan? Are you in favor of the option A or against the option A?
Aye.
What was that?
Aye, he's not.
Aye, okay. So 3 in favor and 4 against. Okay, so the motion fails.
Madam Chairman, I would like to make a motion to accept option C.
Okay, I have a motion to accept option C. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Wimberly. Any discussion?
The main reason, let me just say this. I've had a grandchild in quarantine, and I was a teacher for 30 years, and I don't know who's going to get the hair pulled out first. These little ones, and I can't speak as well for the high school, I'll be honest with you, but these little ones just cannot focus. They cannot pay attention. They cannot, I won't say they don't pick up something or don't grasp something, but they cannot master a skill on that computer. And this goes back to where I was preaching before last year when I was preaching to get these kids back in school. I think with all of the purification and all of the stuff that Mr. Pye and his team, whatever, have had put into the schools to make every effort to protect our kids, that and we appreciate that so much because that took a lot of time and effort and money. But in high school, I don't know whether they can do like they did before and maybe go half schedule. I just can't address high school. But I can tell you that these kids need to be in school. And if you don't get your foundation, like I said, I was an elementary teacher. If you don't get your foundation, you ain't going to make it in high school. So I fully and truly believe that our kids need to be in school. And the numbers are down in, he said we were, 300 kids short of the projected amount for this year? I think he said, is that what he said, Ms. Canarians?
In elementary.
For elementary, we're down 300 projected in elementary schools, something like that? Okay, and so the class sizes hopefully are not going to be as big, and some of them might be, but some of them might not be. If we go to September 7th through 17th, people are going to shut down.
Okay. Just go on, the one that we voted on now. Just talk about the one we're voting on. talk about the one we're
Are
voting
you
on.
done? Are you done? Don't talk about option A. That's already.
It didn't go through.
Can I say something?
Okay, I just want to make a comment, if I could, board members. My personal opinion on it is, I think that, yes, I think we need the time. I think we need the time to get in there, and we need to clean those schools. We need to get them back to the way they were last year. And so that option C gives us only 4 days for our kids to be out on virtual. We've got the holiday there on Monday, so you're only out for 4 days. We have that entire week plus 2 weekends, whatever we need to do to get that job done, get the schools clean, the buses clean, whatever we need to do, that gives us time to get all that done. And then it also gives us some time to hear, because we're hoping to hear back from Supreme Court on the ruling for the mask, which will also give us some time to hopefully have, visit the mask situation, find out how we need, start trying to address that. I think to benefit our kids and to not keep them out of school as long as some of the other options give you, I think they need to be in class, and I think if we can get in there and get the rooms cleaned and get them sanitized and everything and go back, I think this will be much better on the learning portion, the educational portion that we're thinking about for our kids. So I definitely think that's the way we need to
May I
go.
add to the discussion too? I think my heart goes out to all the parents who emailed with children that are disabled. And I get what they're saying. I used to volunteer at the schools in the disabled classes. And I just worry, even though I understand option A is wonderful, I also understand option C can be wonderful too, but we're all going to have to sacrifice a little bit. We've all gone to restaurants, we've all had to wait longer, and we understand why, because there's a shortage of help. Mr. Pye and Ms. Canarins has talked about how it's hard. We're short on bus drivers, we're short on teachers, we're short on nurses, we're short on subs. But I feel like a lot of them will come back if we spend this time resetting, cleaning, and I really think we can do it in 7 days if we hustle. But we're all going to have to sacrifice. Parents are for 4 days, and people in the district are going to have to sacrifice. But Plan C is a lot less sacrifice, especially for our disabled children. And so, Madam Chair, that's why I am happy with Plan C.
If I could say one more thing, there are so many parents that have contacted us, all of us, that saying, please, we've just gotten back to work, we've just gotten settled back in again. Please, I have no one to keep my children. Please don't please don't go virtual, because and you know, things are not real good right now as far as the workforce, like you said, and I feel for those people. I mean, the disabled as well, but I feel for those parents that need to go to work. And we've had people, I mean, they're literally saying, I beg you, please don't go virtual, because I have to work.
Ms. Wimberly? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell?
Madam Chair, Nurse Santa Maria gave us some statistics about how many would still be in quarantine if we went with Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. We turned down Plan A, so that's off the table. So Plan B, there would be 78 still in quarantine when we return versus 271. So those 271 are going to be out of school anyway, okay? And nobody wants virtual, all that, I understand that. But that 2 extra days, that buys us a lot of extra time, that extra 3 days of school, excuse me. That buys us 193 more students that can come back ready to learn in person.
But think about it.
Well, I think that's going to change too with the change of the 7 days and the 10 days, the quarantine period. I think that will change.
To start that, by the time it could affect that 271 number, potentially.
Yes, exactly.
The fact, though, like you said, is look how many are in school that need to be learning compared to 200. I mean, that's nothing compared to 27,000.
Okay, Ms. Wimberly?
Do you have any psychologists on staff that can like look at the impact of good?
So
Mr.
can
Farnsworth?
I just want to make sure, and this is to Ms. Canaran, so the,
Medical tyranny is
again, I understand,
Madam Chair,
we're
point
not
of
talking,
order.
we're no longer talking
I
about
make a
option.
motion to recess. They're not listening. If you disagree with them, they don't listen.
No, and it is what it is, no longer
You
looking at
don't
option
listen when
A,
we
but I
say
just
not
want to
to
make
talk.
Okay,
sure,
guys.
I just want to make sure
Hold on a minute, Justin. Okay, the next time, somebody's gonna get escorted out.
what, again, if you can just tell me, and I know it's redundant, we've talked about it, what was the main driver for the district? And again, can you talk about when the district created this plan, who created that plan? And then the main driver between, let's just skip option B, between option C and option A. Why option A versus option C?
The main driver was the length of time out of school, to increase the mitigating strategies to get our staff healthy and back in school so that we have the staff in order to be there to teach our students and to drive our buses. It was a fear of option C that it would not do much for the spread factor because it's just not enough time in that regard. So that was where our principals and our administration were leaning towards.
Okay. And there was no.
And as Mr. Pye said.
And we mentioned earlier, but did the discussion come up to potentially just keep on trucking? And was that just a blanket no-go from the district?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So the district had
We
some.
felt like that we were at a critical point with staff shortages, that we needed a period of time to, as you said, pause, reset, and get everybody healthy.
And you feel, even though obviously the district presented option A as the strongest option from the district's perspective, do you still feel that any one of these options are viable and actually do positive, good impact to the district moving forward?
I do. Again, as we said when we talked, option C was the least viable for our administration, our teachers, again, just because of our sheer numbers that are out. But again, as we said, we can make a situation work. Going back to your point, we feel like option C puts us more in a situation to be recurring than one that gives us a few more days out of our buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Would you mind just explaining why you think that? It puts us more in a situation of recurring?
Just because we want to be able, our thinking was we wanted to be able to have the time for our staff to get back to and this is not grammatically correct, a fuller capacity so that we're not continuing to have to pull various people to cover classes because of staff outages, to get our administration back to where they can be doing what they need to be doing other than teaching classes, covering things that we talked about earlier.
May I?
Go ahead.
Ms. Canarans and everybody else sitting here, if we were out 4 days, 9 days, 10 days, 15 days, they say that the Delta virus has peaked. Is that correct, Miss Amanda? I've read that on the, well, anyway, I've heard that it has peaked. But still, 99.99% of kids are hurt from COVID or Delta and any of those. I mean, some of them die, we know that. But like I said, they're talking about it as an overall statistic is where I read those. It doesn't matter how many days we're out, it's still going to spread. It's still going to spread. And I heard somebody make the comment the other day, it's not when you get it, it's not if you get it, it's when you get it. And so I don't think that the number of days, I don't care how much cleaning you do, I don't think that's going to stop the spread of COVID, Delta, Lambda, whatever those things are. We wish it would, and we certainly hope it to start back down again, just like it did during the summer. I mean, certainly we all pray for that, I hope, every day. But I don't think it's going to matter how many days, but it does matter to the children on their education how many days they're affected. Because like I said, and I don't know how many, I'm not going to dare ask, but how many elementary parents would tell you, in the South Carolina scores have just come in, and it shows you how bad the scores are that from kids, and we know it's from not being able to be in class. The scores went way down this year. So, and the graduation rates went down this year. And yeah, that was posted today. Yes, it did. It went down from 84 to 86, or 86 to 84, something like that. I'm not sure exactly the number.
Ours went up. Not ours.
But I'm just talking about in general about the COVID. So I'm just saying that it has affected many, many people, but it's not the number of days. We need to get the kids in school, and that is the bottom line. And I just pray and beg that these children are safe, that our teachers are safe, and that we don't want it to spread. I mean, and even though I'm the one that begged and advocated for no mask, if we had to go back to mask, that would be better than our kids being out of school. Hey, listen, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Ms. Canarins, when you were talking about the staffing and getting the staffing back into the schools and being fully staffed or whatever, was that before the change of the quarantine and the amount of time that they were having to stay out?
Yes, I mean, we have not factored in those.
Okay,
that was with the 14-day quarantine period. Yes,
so
ma'am.
these couple of days then is not going to make a difference because they will be able to come back by that time. Yeah, because if that was the reason for the 2 weeks, then now that we shortened it from 14 to 7, that's a whole week, and there's only a 4-day difference or whatever it is. Is it 4 days difference?
It's a 3-school day between, A is off the table. I mean, so I would say between B and C would be the two options there. So it's a 3-school day swing.
Yeah. So we should have them back fully staffed at that point. Then.
Assuming they're asymptomatic and can get a negative
what
test.
I'm saying,
Right.
you're comparing
Because
200.
remember, the 7-day, they have to present the negative test.
Right.
And be asymptomatic. So I guess we could, go back to that slide.
Again, I'm looking at the fact that we're talking about 200 kids compared to 26,000
We're
something.
talking about staff now.
Well,
Yeah, I was talking about staff.
sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. I'm going to ask, and Ms. Canarins, by all means, I don't know if Mr. Pye is still on the phone. By all means, you are more than welcome to pass this one to Mr. Pye. Because I'm going to ask a pretty blunt question. Thinking through all of this, and now that the board is looking at this option C, just talking out loud, it's a pretty big disruption, I think you would agree, to go to virtual.
Yes, sir.
Across the district. That is a major disruption for our students, for our teachers, for our community, for our parents. Does the benefit of option C, and again, feel free to pass this on to Mr. Pye, I have to assume that the benefit outweighs the consequence of not doing option C, of just staying the course, or else you would have presented another option.
Mr. Pye, I am gonna let you help weigh in on this if you're still on the line.
I would like to hear, and again, maybe we can call him wherever he is, because I do think that I just want to understand and make sure that the district feels that option C is still a better option than doing nothing.
Yes, sir, absolutely. That we do feel that is a better option than doing nothing, because it does give us a small window to take that pause to hopefully regain some of our staff, get them back in the classrooms teaching, get some of our students back. As Amanda said, we do need time to get the 7-day, 10-day. That's going to, the tracking process is going to put additional work on some of the nurses or designees, unless we can find an outside source that can help us do that effectively. And so absolutely, doing option C is better than not doing anything at all at this point in time with our rising case numbers.
Madam Chair, I'd like to call for the vote.
And I think we're trying to get Mr. Pye on the phone.
Did you get him?
Mr. Pye, if you can still hear us, would you give me a thumbs up on my phone?
Well, I don't blame them. I don't blame them.
Well, he can't text us because we got our phones turned off.
Mr. Pye, if you will hang up from the Teams meeting, we're just going to call you from one of the phones and put you up to a microphone, if that's okay.
Yeah, the bell schedule.
Yes, I can hear
Okay,
you.
we're going to
I
put you
forgot
on
the
speaker.
question. Mr. Barnsberg, you were asking something. Would you repeat it, and I'll give you my answer?
I can. Can I just have the phone? Oh, you can do it? Okay. So, Mr. Pye, I just want to make sure, again, obviously, option A is no longer on the table from the board. And so, in my mind, I'm just trying to ensure that you feel option C is still a better option than not going virtual at all and continuing the course that we're on today.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can y'all hear me? Yes, loud and clear. All right. Well, with that said, that's a tough question because we it's just hard to predict something when you have nothing to compare it with. I've heard the arguments both ways. I am concerned about the staffing, and I'm concerned about 5,000 students not being in school. I mean, and it's growing every day. It's not getting any better, and I think Labor Day is only we haven't peaked yet in our district. I think it could get worse. There's no guarantee of anything. It's just the more days our staff has, the better likelihood we can get workers to open up the kiosks in the high school. We can rearrange schedules in the schools to accommodate the mitigations that we all had in place last year. If we decide plexiglass could be somewhat of a help, we can install them all back in, and it'll take a few days to do that. We should have all of our what's those things? Those purifiers in. I'm just saying those are things that every day is a positive. So A is off the table, and I like A. That's what everybody wanted. So, but it's off the table. So I would definitely say B. You made a valid point. It's a disruption. You're disrupting it 3 more days, but you're giving a better odds that we can come back stronger. That's all I'm saying. It's better odds. It's no guarantee of anything. But I think it works in our favor, not just with the 200 more kids back. I'm worried about the staff being back, and of course the kids of those 271, they could have staff members involved there. Give us a chance to get these volunteers trained and on board, and that's what we think we can do. To get people to help food service and custodial to try to get the company worked out for them, and possibly even the transportation. It's just every day takes time to negotiate those things and advertise and get them. And of course, we're still trying to fill positions, and so we actually stole. And I don't have a problem because you all read the article in the paper about how wonderful everything was in Charleston. Well, I beg to differ. We had just last week 3 from that company to quit. So I know they had 3 openings. They said they had none. And so 3 of them quit them at $19 an hour to work for us at $15 an hour because of the working conditions, the way we do business. So I had to repeat that. I just threw that fact out to tell you that what I'm hearing here and everywhere else, I don't want to be out of school. I'm not a proponent for virtual learning, so I'm making it very clear. But I am erring on the side of the safety of the children as we have done from day one. And we did the things we did. I know we were highly criticized, but we didn't have the numbers we have now. This is a different virus, but at the same time, what we did worked. Our dashboards, that's when we were back face to face, because the dashboards kept telling us, even through the hybrid, that our numbers were really strong, and they were better than the community's numbers, and therefore don't weigh our stuff onto the community. Let's wait on our own numbers. And so our numbers here is going up dramatically every single day, and that's my concern. And how we've been doing the contact tracing, where we made major changes in the last week. We're making them daily. You heard her say she's within at least 1 day of being where she needs to be. So we see it coming, but it's not there enough to be able to give you a definite predictor one way or the other. But my team wanted A is off the board, so naturally B moves into the top spot. But, if we hit C, I think we have to do something. I don't think we can ignore it altogether, but if that's the wishes of the board, and I see all the valid reasons why, then as Mr. Fanarin said, we'll do our darndest to do whatever we can to make whatever work. But you asked me what I thought, and I'll just tell you.
Yep, thank you, sir.
Mr. Pye? Mr. Pye? Oh, I'm sorry.
What is it?
Mr. Pye, can you hear me?
I can barely hear whoever's talking. I can't tell who it is.
Are your speaker on? Is your mic on?
Yeah.
If your mic is on, he should hear you.
Mr. Pye, this is Barbara.
Yeah.
What's been our motto from day one? Kids first, right?
Yeah, kids first is always our motto. That's still my motto tonight. I'm not changing it all, but
Mr. Pye, I
can't become a guilt trip. I'm doing what I think is the best interest based on what I've got from medical people, what I've got from my teachers, what I've got from my principals. This is a uniting, this is not my personal decision. I have my own personal beliefs, but I am never never have run the district on my personal philosophy. You'd see some things totally different. But that's not it. I'm a public school servant, and I have to look at all of our public. Everyone's voice counts, and some are louder than others and what have you, but some of the stuff we've gotten has not been accurate on both sides. And some of the things have been very good possible solutions, and we were just asking for the time to try to make as much of that happen as can happen. But again, this has nothing to do about what I care about children.
Well, Mr. Pine, the numbers are not going to go down. I know that they say that Delta has reached its peak. I mean, none of us know that, but the numbers, we can be out for 1 day, 2 days, 50 days. The numbers are not, we're still going to have COVID here, and they're still going to get it. And I think that with them cleaning the schools, that option C, that you can do that in that length of time, and that we can be back. Mr. Pye, we've got to get these kids back. They're not even in there enough to get their feet wet. They haven't even been in there.
Crosby,
Sir.
The question, the vote is yours to vote yes or no, expressed to your board members and all the public, and we don't allow your comments, which is fine to do. That's your right to do that. But this is not my final decision. I was asked by Mr. Barnsberg to give my opinion, and that's exactly what I did. And I can't do anything beyond that. So I'm not casting any vote. I don't get to do that. And I tell you, whatever you come up with, I'll make it work the best I can.
Thank you, Mr. Pye. Okay, I think we had a call for the vote. Do I have a second? Call for the vote for
You've already
the
got
motion that was made for option C.
I did.
We had a second?
Yeah.
Okay. We've had our discussion. Okay. This is option C, yes. All in favor? Barbara?
I made the original motion, and she seconded it.
Do you still want to go
Yes,
that way?
it's still there.
I would make a motion, I would ask
What?
Jermaine Wade, Ms. Crosby would withdraw her motion.
No.
Option C.
No.
You can't do that. No. We still.
I could ask you to withdraw
We
your
already
vote.
did it. We did that already. Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second, and we've had our discussion. So all in favor
Of C.
of C? This is C. All in favor? Mr. Guthrie, join in, please, if you're, whenever we get to yours.
What happened to y'all?
Okay, all in
What
favor
happened
of
to
C?
y'all? You just
Barbara?
voted for A.
Barbara?
Aye.
You're for C, Mr. Guthrie? Did he say aye?
Yes, I said yes, aye.
Okay, so we have two, all opposed for C? Okay, so we have two that was for C, and we have 4 that was opposed for C.
Madam Chair, I make a motion.
I'm sorry,
that-
3 that was, 5 was opposed.
I make a motion that we accept option B as presented by the district.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for option B. Do we have any discussion?
I would just say this is a compromise for me, because I did think we could make this happen with C. But after listening to everyone who is in charge of everything that's running here, I can compromise and hope it is temporary. No, not hope, it is temporary, because we can't keep doing this to our children.
Yep,
Ms.
and I agree. My reason for switching my vote was that as well. Originally, C was what I wanted, just because of the time frame. Wanted to keep the kids in school as much as possible. But we also have to have the teachers there. We also have to have our staff there. We have to have everybody, our custodial staff there. We have to have the bus drivers. And if that's going to help to get those people back in, then that's what we got to have to run the district. So,
Is it
I
three,
mean,
it's 3 more days, correct?
3 more days.
Okay.
Miss Hughes?
Yes.
Not tonight, but do the parents ever get to say what they want? I mean, we get 100 emails a day. The parents aren't even getting their, you're
I
not
also
listening
would
to the
like to say
parents.
that we are getting an incredible amount of emails from parents, from teachers, from community members, and, you know, there are plenty of parents who have reached out and are pleading with us to do something and to make it safe for them to have their children in school. And yes, they need to be in school, and I 100% believe that. But from everything that we've heard tonight, safety is an issue. When we have nurses who can't do their job, safety is an issue, and we have to think about that. And that is what we all want. I have 4 children. I get it. I want them in school too. I know how important it is, and I understand that every day they're out matters. But I also understand that we are in a very difficult situation. What is happening in these schools right now, what our teachers, our nurses, our administrators are dealing with is difficult and is often presenting situations that really aren't necessarily the safest for our children. And we know that because we are hearing it. So we are listening. We are listening. I can promise you, we are listening to everyone, and we are weighing all of this. And we have, this is a compromise. And I think it's a compromise. It allows the district time to make these changes, to come back, bring our children back who are on quarantine, bring our staff back, and have a reset and move forward from here. And I think it's all about compromise right now.
Okay, anybody else have a comment? Okay. All in favor of option B? Mr. Guthrie?
Aye.
Okay, all opposed to option B? It's 6 and 1.
Guys,
The vote
this is
6 to
this.
1. Barbara, discussion's over, I'm sorry. Okay, now I need a motion to adjourn, please. I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we accept the bell schedule as shown, as presented earlier in the presentation.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to accept the bell schedule as presented. Any discussion on that?
When will the bell schedule go? When will the bell schedule go into effect?
The day that we return, September the day that we return, September the 16th.
Okay, thank you.
And that will be part of the communication that goes out this evening with the other decision that was made, and we will make sure that it goes out more than once and on many different platforms.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yeah. Okay, all in favor? Mr. Guthrie, are you still with us?
Yes, aye.
Okay, we have 6 and 1 absent. Okay, I need a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Mr. Farnsworth, seconded by Mr. Mitchum. Any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Guthrie? 6 and 1 absent. Thank you very much.